Following is a conversation with Rob Garnett. He's a 23-year veteran of the Navy and a former Navy SEAL senior chief. In this episode, we talk about his combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, including his security detail for the president of Iraq. We talk about his injuries and recovery, and his involvement with One More Wave Foundation. Enjoy. Rob, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I wanted to get started and talk about your childhood, teenage years, and get into your journey going into the military. So you grew up here in Southern California, right?
I did. We bounced back and forth between Southern California and Northern California. My whole family's from Riverside, Orange County area. And then probably third, fourth grade, we moved up to Northern California. And that's where I went to school, was near Lake Tahoe. Spent a bunch of time up there. Did water polo, swimming, kind of water sports kid all growing up. That's what we did competitively as our sport, really, for our family. My brother did the same thing. Then we got to high school. I finished high school, moved back down to Southern California, and that's where I kind of started my transition from going to college, going to school, living at home, into kind of moving out on my own, and then, joining the service. The first thing I did was jump right into going to school at Long Beach State. Wanted to play water polo, thought it'd be cool. Lasted about 6 months and said, this sucks, not for me, and I dropped out.
So you went to school in Long Beach?
I did. I tried. I was a horrible student, just wanted to party and hang out and not study. I kind of had enough. School was always rough for me. I was not good at it, so I was always just kind of staring out the window, wanting to do something else. And so when I realized I didn't have to do it anymore, I was like, I'm out. I'm not going to do this anymore. So yeah, I definitely left. But for a long time, I was really bummed that I'd done that. It took me a while to realize that it's okay. Not college isn't for everybody.
So were you feeling like that in the military still? You're like, man, I should have finished college?
A little bit, but not really. I felt kind of fulfilled and like I had purpose there, so I didn't really feel like finishing school was going to help me that much. So I didn't really feel a pull to it. A lot of folks do that, especially when you're rotating from being where you can deploy or go on lots of trips or stay at home. That maybe during that stay at home time you can finish your school, and a lot of guys did that. I just never got around to it. I did other things.
So you went to college in Long Beach. So how old were you whenever you ended up dropping out?
How old was I? Probably 19.
Oh, okay.
18, 19, something like that. So I was a bit younger. So my birthday's in September. So I didn't even turn 18 until the summer after I graduated high school. So I went to school for a little bit. And then probably after the first semester, I decided, hey, I'm going to try this other thing. We had to go be a commercial diver. I'd always been into the ocean, been surfing, and bodyboarding, boogie boarding, scuba, snorkel, all that, all growing up. So I thought, hey, this is a good move for me. So I went to the College of Oceaneering, which is also in Long Beach. So went to that school. That school kind of broke it down for a couple different jobs. It's just a trade school, really. Everyone thinks you're going to be doing this magical Jacques Cousteau diving exploration, but really it's construction underwater. It's just hard work, right? So you're either inspecting what people are doing underwater, you're welding underwater, or you're a dive medic. And so that's what I was. I was a dive med tech, which turns you into being kind of an EMT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you like the medical field at all? Like getting into EMT, learning the basic stuff like that?
I did. I thought it was cool. It was pretty challenging. I thought it would be a lot easier than it was, but I found I had to study and pay attention to be successful at it. But I liked it. It was a little bit shocking because when you become an EMT, you need to do some ride-alongs with real folks that are doing it. And where we did it was in Watts, Los Angeles. And so right off the bat, we were going, and it was insane. I couldn't believe it. But one of my first nights, we're driving in the van, and people just wouldn't move out of the way when they would turn on the siren. So they had this big 1,000,000 candle watt flashlight, and they would just flash it in the back of the car in people's mirrors so they couldn't see, and they would physically pull over and then would leave. And it was so dangerous when we'd go around those spots that if you were going to go someplace, you had to wait till the police got there too, because they would just come rob the truck.
The EMS crew.
Right. They would come rob it for all the meds or drugs that might be on board if you had paramedics. And so
did that ever happen while you were there?
It didn't happen to me, but it happened to some other students that went out. They were somewhere in East LA, I can't remember, and they got held up.
They're like, I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah, it's not for me. Yeah. I think the very first thing we went to, somebody had kicked a pregnant lady down the stairs on a bus. That was the very first thing we went up to. I thought, man, this is a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what'd you remember from those ride-alongs? Anything other than that?
Just just being like, it was a lot of, it was hard work. People are super into it. Like, it's super rewarding to go and help people. Everyone's always nice. When you went to help people, they're very grateful that you're coming in. So it was good. It's hard work. at the end of the day, you're definitely tired. So it was a good job. I liked it. And I did it for just a little bit. I did it. I think I only did it for about 2 weeks, which is probably the minimum needed for to become an official EMT. Before I was like, okay, now I want to go do this commercial dive thing. And so what that school would do is they would kind of help you get placed with a couple companies.
Okay.
And the one I went to was in Galveston, Texas.
Nice. And so this was in the early 90s?
That's right. This is probably 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you moved to Texas. How was all that?
Yeah, so we went to Galveston, Texas.
Right there on the coastline?
It is, and it's definitely like a roughneck kind of area. So, it went from, living in, Southern California to there. And it's definitely, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's like a construction site, but it's on the water instead. So moved into like a shack with, I think it was 3 or 4 other guys, and we're all just kind of living there. What I learned pretty quickly is that I wasn't going to get to dive at all. When you're a new guy, it's like being a new guy in probably any profession. You're going to do all the crap jobs first. And so all I got to do was kind of hold the hose when other guys were diving. And they'd make great money, and I would make minimum wage. So I wasn't super stoked for that.
And so now you're like early 20s.
Yep.
You're living in Galveston, Texas with a bunch of dudes on a crew.
Yep.
You're holding this hose every day and the humidity. And you're like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, and I mean, what everyone did when it was time to get off was, go booze it up, go get some tattoos, go get in some fights, and then do it again the next day. So
Did you get any tattoos?
no, I didn't. But if I would have stayed there longer, I'm sure I would have had to. But the reason I left wasn't because I didn't think I wanted to do it, it's just because I didn't have any money. I had taken out student loans to go to both schools, to college and to the college for the trade school to learn how to dive. And I just wasn't making the payments. I didn't have enough money to make the payments. And so I started looking on the back of the form I would get in the mail that says, hey, you haven't paid for 90 days. And it would say like ways to defer student loans. And one of them was like, join the service, you can get it. So I was like, oh, let's check this out. And so that's what led me to going to talk to recruiters.
Do they still do that?
I imagine they do, probably.
Because can you get out of prison, like a prison sentence for joining the military, or did they get rid of that?
I think that's still, I think that's mostly gone away.
Yeah.
I think,
They're like, we don't need you that bad.
right, there's not, I think there's enough people that are joining that they don't have to do that. But no, I did meet people that had done that, where they'd gotten in, but I'm pretty sure that stopped, a little bit later than that.
Yeah, like after the Vietnam era, they're like, all right, guys.
Right. We're not drafting people. We don't really have a big numbers. So no, I don't think that's the case anymore, but I'm sure we can flip that switch pretty easily.
So you went and talked to the recruiter.
Yep.
Like, I got to get out from under these loans.
Yeah. Yep.
So did you know about the SEAL teams whenever you joined?
I did. I mean, I'd kind of heard of it, but like, I didn't have really any friends or know anybody that had been in the military. I had my grandfather had been in the Army in Korea. We never chatted. I had a cousin that I think had been in the Navy for 5 minutes, but I didn't really know anybody realistically that could tell me about it. So I definitely didn't know anything about any type of special operations. And when I went, the first recruiter I went to was the Army, because I'd seen some pictures that they had on the recruiting poster, and it had like people diving with like uniforms on, like camouflage uniforms. Like, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tried to do. I tried to go in the Army hoping to be a diver in the Army.
So how'd that work out?
Yeah, they just said no. They're like, no, you're not doing that. We don't do that.
Right off the street.
Yeah, no, we don't need you. We're good. So that's what made me go over to the Navy. And I tried the same thing. I'm like, hey, I'm already a commercial diver. I'd like to go be a Navy diver. Can I do that program? And the way that recruiting works, most of us know, is that each month or quarter they have different quotas of folks they need to bring into different programs, and that was already full. So they told me that they dove at BUDS, and that I could go in the SEAL teams and do diving also. And so that's what led me into the path to go try out for SEAL teams.
And this is 95, 96 time frame?
This is still like, so I only did the thing in Galveston for a couple months. So this is still like 93, I think.
Okay.
Beginning 93.
So this is kind of pre-internet, so they tell you about BUDS and all that, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they didn't tell me anything. They're like, yeah, you'll find out about it later.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Okay, so you signed up, and then how long before you left out for boot camp?
Right. So I think they gave me, so when you came in at that time to go, if you wanted to go to BUDS or any kind of other special groups, you had to choose a job that was specific to them. So I chose parachute rigger, I think, which all we do is kind of take care of the air crew's equipment, ejection seats, flight suits, everything involved with folks working on aircraft. And so I think I waited a couple months. Maybe it wasn't 6, maybe 3 months to go do that. And then I went to boot camp. And at boot camp's the first time that I saw, I think there was a SEAL there that worked maybe at the pool, and he probably gave us some type of test. I think we had to take a physical screening test in boot camp to get some orders to buds. And I did. I passed the test there. I finished boot camp and then went off to my trade school, which is parachute rigging. And I did that. I think that was another 4 months, maybe. It was something pretty short. I was in Millington, Tennessee. And again, there was another SEAL there, and I had to take the screening test again. And at that time, I was the only person from that school that was going. So it was kind of good because I got a lot of attention from the guy that worked there. And then from there, they were starting a program. The attrition rate was so bad in the early 90s and the 80s that they were like trying to figure out different ways to help people make it through. And they thought that if they exposed sailors to SEALs and SEAL teams, that maybe it would kind of make you realize that you could do it too. It wasn't a super impossible task. And so they sent me to a unit in Puerto Rico. It's called Naval Special Warfare Unit in Puerto Rico. And so I went down there, and all it was they had this little camp. It was on the edge of the water, and all the teams from the East Coast would come out and do training. And so that really helped a lot for sure, because now I've got all these people coming in all the time. They're hazing me every time they come into town. They all know me because I'm the only young dude. And then they started bringing some other guys. So we got a couple other young sailors like me that did the same thing. But it really kind of helped me get ready to go. I met all these guys. I was really impressed that, they're all friends. They all seem to like what they're doing. They got to go do cool stuff. They got to kind of live this rock star lifestyle. I'm like, oh, that's for me. I want to do that. And so that whole process really helped me. Like, I'd been swimming my whole life, but I hadn't swum in the ocean. Distance rise, doing 1, 2, 3 miles in the ocean. They had us swim from one of the islands back. It was pretty long, and it really helped me to just kind of learn and go, oh, this is something that's doable. And then letting physical fitness become a part of your daily life was something that I hadn't experienced. When you're in high school or college, you might go work out, but like the way that the SEAL teams are is every single day when you get in the morning, there's PT time, physical training time, every single day. Nothing's planned for the first 2 hours, and everyone's expected to be doing some type of whatever it is, whether it's everyone together or you on your own. And so that started very young for me. Before I ever went to Buds, we just kind of learned that's what you do. You come into work, you see what's going on, make sure everyone's there, and you start working out. And so that really helped me get ready.
So was swimming out in the ocean was the first time that swim to the island and back? They're like, all right, for day one, go out there.
No, every couple times a week, we'd do something called a run, swim, run. We'd run up to the top of this hill that they had, come back down, and then swim out a tiny little island off there. It'd be a mile swim, then come back in, and then run again.
So not crazy.
No, nothing. Little mini triathlon things or biathlons. So that was the first time I'd ever done that, where you run and then swim and then run and then do some other calisthenics and stuff. So we did that first, and then we did this. I think the island's called Piñeros. They dropped us off on Piñeros, and then you swim back, and it was like 7 nautical miles. It was brutal. They had a boat in the middle that would give you like Gatorade. But that was it.
And this is your first time kind of doing swims in the ocean and long swims out there.
Sure, yeah, never done long swims like that.
Do you remember what you were thinking about at the time? Were you like, what am I doing?
Watching the island just move around. I'm like, well, you're swimming back to that thing? Yeah. But we got stung by lots of jellyfish, right? Because it's warm water, so we're just swimming in shorts. So you get stung a lot. Remember, we'd stop, boats would help us. We'd kind of slather some like Vaseline on your skin to give you a little bit of protection, but that was it. And then we were finishing, and we finished the swim, and there's a bunch of people, like people from the island also would swim. And you finish, and it's hard to walk. Just I remember feeling kind of just exhausted. And the first thing the old guys do is they don't give you any water. They hand you a beer. It's like, here you go, get this. And so,
different Navy, different times.
Absolutely. But no, I loved it. It was great for me. I felt very fortunate that I got to do that. Yeah.
What do you think you learned the most from those guys, other than like the physical, like routines and working out? What do you think you picked up from those guys?
Just that everyone was part of the team, and everyone wanted to never be the last person in the team or the person that wasn't contributing. You always were kind of battling to make sure you were in there and lending a hand. And I had never experienced that before in anything I'd been around. When you're a kid and you are in different sports teams, like the favorite part of your sports thing is when you get to go on a trip, right? You get on the bus and you drive and everyone's going together. It doesn't matter what sport you're doing. It feels great to be a part of that group. And so I saw these guys and I realized they're doing that for their whole life, right? They got to be on this group, go do something meaningful and hang out with their best friends all the time. And I thought, man, this is fantastic. I want this. And so I learned the value of teamwork and, just being able to depend on each other. And it was incredible for me. I really was drawn to it.
And not jumping too far ahead, but during your time as a BUDS instructor, that's the biggest portion, right?
Teamwork?
Yeah, but seeing if guys can work together, judging their character.
No, absolutely, and just putting one foot in front of the other, and just knowing that it's a marathon, it's not a race, and just kind of learning how to chug along. The thing that everyone says when you're in Hell Week specifically is it's just you can make it to the next meal, right? They have to feed you, yeah, so you can make it to the next meal. Nothing's that bad, and so get to eat, and then you're like, okay, I can do the next thing, and you just go one thing at a time, and really that's a great way to go through anything. Just put your foot in front of the other and keep moving. When you think about that long road, it looks really long, but if you can just do that next thing, then you're winning.
So again, not jumping too ahead, we'll get back on track here in a
Sure.
second, but I've known you as like the very relaxed surfer Rob.
Sure.
Ever since I met you. Whenever you were an instructor, were you like the nice instructor, or could you turn it on and off? Were you different in your role?
I think I don't yell still. I never yelled.
Yeah.
Still pretty chill, but you have to work still, right? You still gotta, if you go through a training like that, you want to earn it, right? So if you went through and you felt like you had it easy, I think you'd feel like you were cheated somehow.
Absolutely.
I know that's how most people feel. And so, no, I did just like everybody else. I'm not a screamer. I'm not a yeller, but you can be just as diabolical, I think, without screaming.
You could probably almost be more diabolical if you're just always the quiet, calm guy.
Sure, yeah. Then if you yell, then they know something's up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, after your time in Puerto Rico, you go
Yep.
through training.
Yep.
Do you have any big memories that stick out during your time going through Buds and Hell Week?
No, I remember getting ready to go, and it was kind of neat because the night before you start, so I remember I met up with a couple friends that had been in Puerto Rico with me. I turned 21, like my second day, and we got to Buds. So for some reason, we thought it was a good idea to go to Tijuana. Came back because at that time, they were really trying to keep people from doing that. So the bars, or like the on-base bars, were 18 and up. And that was to keep everyone from going to Mexico.
Wow.
And that changed, years later. But
So what was Tijuana like in the 90s?
it was cool. It was fun.
Yeah.
Everyone was happy. It was fun. You could walk up back and forth. No big deal. All the little clubs and restaurants were super friendly. It's not like now. I would just drive through if you're going down there to get further down. But it was fun. It was a good time. We had gone when I was a kid all the time. We'd go pretty far down and go camping all the way down a place called San Felipe, way down. So I had a lot of experience going into Mexico, but it was fun. We weren't supposed to. I don't think you're allowed to when you're in the Navy.
Yeah, especially in training too.
No, absolutely not. So yeah, but no, I remember doing that. I remember starting Hell Week. It's kind of you start Sunday night and then end on Friday. And I remember Sunday night. So I started in my Buds class. My Hell Week class was 198. So there was a guy who was in class 98 that came and talked to us the night before. He'd been to Vietnam. It was kind of cool to get pumped up by this Vietnam SEAL that had been 100 classes before us, and it kind of pepped us up, and then we kicked off.
Wow. Do you remember what he talked about?
No,
I mean,
not
this is
at
a long
all.
time ago.
No, I do. I remember him talking about Jane Fonda, which is like every Vietnam vet's guy's thing to talk about. I think we watched a couple movies and then we started. But he's still around. His name's McIntosh.
Really?
Yeah, I think he might not be. He might have just recently died. But it's an old dude that lived in Fiddler's Cove, which is an on-base place where you can park your sailboat. And he lived in a boat that didn't move for like 30 years.
That's the most Vietnam era sailor I've ever heard of.
Absolutely. I remember going down there visiting a buddy that was doing the same thing, and he was up at the top of a mast welding with flip-flops and UDT shorts on and sunglasses.
Well, I remember when I was on Pendleton, a guy similar to that in our unit. It's like, man, where are you getting all this money from? Because we were like E4s or about to be E5s at the time, or. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I sold my house and I just live in an RV on the beach on Camp Pendleton. And he's like, I have no payments. I just move my RV like once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a good life.
Yep. So you get done with Buds. So where do you go after there? What year did you graduate Buds?
So I checked into SEAL Team 3 in 95.
Okay.
So 95, yeah.
All right.
So at that time, you would leave Buds. So Buds was 6 months, and then you'd go to jump school. In Fort Benning. So we went to Fort Benning for a couple weeks.
How'd you feel about jumping out of planes?
It was fine.
Didn't bother you?
I didn't know. I'd been like, I was big into rock climbing. So like heights, I wasn't really bothered by heights. I'd never done skydiving or been tandem or anything, but it was fine. I was much more scared of being hit by other people because when you do it in those big groups, there's always helmets and backpacks, weapons falling. So just getting out of there and not getting hurt was definitely the trick for sure. But then you finish jump school, and then you check into your first team. And so for me, it was SEAL Team 3 on the West Coast.
So how was that check-in? How'd that go?
It was good. So at that time, it was a little bit different than now. So when you'd finish Buds and then get through jump school, you'd check into a team, and then you'd be on probation for 6 months. And then each team would kind of run an advanced training for the people that they got. So each buds class that would go through, they'd split up the new guys and spread them to all the teams that needed people. And so each team would kind of run training. They called it STT, SEAL Tactical Training. And so I think Team 3 and maybe Team 5 ran one together. And so we went through that for a while. When we finished that, they would do like an oral board where they kind of question you, just like in the Navy, any type of a surface or any type of a pin that you're going to get, there's some type of a board. You'd answer questions. They'd kind of go through a bunch of stuff. You would have had to do quite a few things, whether it's jumping or diving, shooting, demo. And then at the end, then you'd get your trident, and then you'd be officially a SEAL.
Do you remember that moment, getting your trident?
I do. It's a big deal because you get it, and then you go out. At that time, we went out back behind the team, and then the whole team's back there, and then you get your trident pinned onto your chest. And so, like, the CO pinned my trident on my chest, and then everyone else helped after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you weren't married at this time yet, right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No,
Way down the line.
No, not for a couple of years. Yeah.
All right. So you get to Team 3.
Yep.
And did you deploy right away? Did you start workups? How was that rotation?
Yeah. So I got right into a platoon once I'd finished training, and then just started getting ready to go on a trip. The first deployment we did was to Okinawa, and so we'd go hang out there, and then go do exercises with the Marines and everyone else that was part of the ARG that was there. And we went on a bunch of trips, whether it was mostly Southeast Asia. I think we went to Thailand, Singapore, a couple places like that. We ended up going to Australia, and then came back to Coronado. But at that time, you would work up for 6 months and then deploy for 6, and then just keep rotating forever as long as you stayed there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're at Team 3.
Yep.
And you deployed just once before you rotated out of Team 3?
Nope. So then I came back and we switched. And so at that time, each team had like an area that they covered. And Team 3 was the Middle East. And so almost everybody just did exercises and work in the Middle East. And so after that, we deployed to Bahrain, did a bunch of stuff over there. Same thing. We would do exercises, train local countries. Maybe it's Kuwaitis or people in Oman, just depending on what the State Department had set up. Because what happens when it comes to a lot of foreign policy, when we're trying to get countries to do things we'd like them to do, we'll offer different things, whether it's money, funding, instruction, or military training. And maybe you'd go there and they go, hey, we want you to teach this group close, CQB or sniper or diving or skydiving. And so you'd go to these different trips, and there'd be a focus on what it was, and it just depended on where you're going and what they'd agreed to that we would teach. Some tactics you didn't teach like Five Eyes people, and some you did. It just depended on what we were doing. So we did that. When I was on that deployment, we were starting to really get interested in Iraq. Obviously, the first Gulf War had happened in 91, and so Saddam was still messing around. He was still smuggling lots of oil and dates and other things because there's embargoes against him. And so we started doing interdictions of smuggling craft coming out of the Persian.
What's your opinion on Saddam? Because I have a bunch of friends that are from Kuwait, and I talk to them because you have Shia and Sunni. But
Sure.
They talk about that they didn't like Saddam,
Sure.
but that they thought Saddam was good for Iraq.
Sure.
Because he kept the structure and everything.
Sure.
At the time.
Do
you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's just like any dictator. Of course, it's easier when one person's in charge. Democracy's hard. But I mean, he did good things, but he was also horrible to the people. I mean, his sons were horrific. Uday and Qusay would drive around in the North Iraq, where like Mosul or Kirkuk, where he's from, and they were allowed to just grab whoever they wanted off the street. They would grab pretty girls off the street and take them and force them to be with them.
Oh, wow.
When we, jumping ahead of time, when we did the invasion of Iraq, we went to Baghdad, there was all these palaces, right? And one of them was theirs, Uday and Qusay's, and they had a lion cage out front, and when we got there, there's still lions in there, and there's a hot tub next to it, and they would throw people into the lions to get eaten while they'd party in the hot tub.
Wow. So during that part, you were at the palaces?
Yeah. I mean, they weren't partying, but yeah, they were gone. But yeah, no, we went there. Wow. The lions were still there. When we got in there, they had a big zoo still, and a bunch of the animals had been let out. So you'd see like zoo animals in town before people could go recover them.
Just walking through the middle of Iraq, tigers and lions.
Yeah, like giraffes, all kinds of weird stuff. There were some pools that had those really small river dolphins in them that they had. I think it was called the Water Palace, but there's all kinds of crazy stuff like that you'd see that they had in all these different palaces. They're just all over the place.
Wow. So getting back to that rotation with Team 3, so during this time of training, how many times did you deploy while you were at Team 3?
So I did 3,
3.
and then went to become a buds instructor.
Okay.
I came back and did quite a few more deployments, but I deployed with 3 again at the end when in 2011 was the last time I deployed. That was also with Team 3.
Did you guys get in any combat whenever you were in the first deployments with Team 3?
Sure. No, I mean, in the beginning, it wasn't so heavy. It didn't get heavy until much later. Most of the stuff early on during invasions or moving through both Iraq and Afghanistan, there wasn't lots of heavy combat. It wasn't until the cities started needing to be kind of cleared out that stuff got serious, whether that was in Baghdad and places like Sadr City or Ramadi and Fallujah in Iraq, and then all over Afghanistan seemed to blow up later on. But no, of course, all the groups got into it. It just depends on where you were.
So other than the training aspects, what are some of the things that your platoon got into?
Well, and we did all kinds of, like shipboardings
Yeah.
were crazy. You'd pull up alongside ships that wouldn't, follow the rules and go board the ship, and you'd get on there and they'd have welded themselves into and you'd have to cut it open, or, they'd try to go into Iranian waters and you'd have to jump in there and steer the boat, so they couldn't do that. They'd load the boats so heavy that if you tried to slow down, they would sink. So we would wait and have to stay on there and steer until we could get somebody that can come take over the ship.
So was the VBSS, was that as cool as you thought it, pictured it in your mind when you were training?
Definitely not. Definitely not. No one on there was, wanted to fight like we wanted to.
There's no armed pirates.
No, that's what we were hoping, right? We'd get on and get to duke it out, but it was never like that. It was always some people just smuggling, usually older males that had probably not eaten for a couple days and, just trying to do their thing. And we'd come on and throw them on the ground and destroy their boat and then take over their boat too.
Yeah.
So no, it's definitely not the excitement that we all hoped for sure.
So during that first tenure, do you remember the first gunfight you ever got into?
I remember getting shot at for sure. I remember just thinking how angry it made you, that someone's trying to hurt you. That's kind of the first reaction I remember.
So what happened with that?
I'm trying to remember which one specifically. People shooting at us in cars or boats, driving around. But like very specifically, probably in houses. We went into one house, and as we walked in the door, they just started shooting.
From outside or in the house?
In the house, inside the house, in Baghdad. Just shooting and just being lucky that they didn't know how to aim or how to use a gun, because it was just bullet holes all around and no one getting hit. But most of those times it was just, you're just kind of in shock. You just kind of become a robot. For me at least, you just kind of go and your training kind of kicks in, and those, hopefully that muscle memory kind of helps you out. But always the first one was a little bit of anger. Like, I can't believe these people are trying to do this to me. Of course, I'm coming into their house in the middle of the night, so what do I expect? But the first reaction I remember is just being angry, really angry.
And that was the time in the house?
I think so, yeah.
So were you guys there to take somebody?
No, for sure. Yeah, so we would, be back at the base, and we'd get target packages, and they'd say, hey, we think we're going to look for this person. They're doing this thing. Here's a picture of them. So we're hoping to get. And so we'd go to the house. Sometimes it's the wrong house. Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's way more people than there's supposed to be. And so, yeah, you just go grab the guys. We'd have little armbands with their pictures on it, like a little baseball, you put all the plays or whatever it's going to be on your arm, and you just kind of look, yep, that looks like the person.
Just holding it up to him, you're like, all right.
Yep, and then bring them back. Lots of use of translators and trying to figure out who's the right person, and then taking them back to base and putting them in some type of detention center. But there's many, many nights, especially the first couple of years, where it was every night, all the time. You just would sleep during the day and wake up at night, work out a little bit, and then see what was up for the night.
And you're getting a target package almost every night?
Multiples, yeah.
Really?
There was one deployment we did where we were in Baghdad, and we were staying on the airfield, and we'd get 2 or 3 at night sometimes. They were just trying to disrupt Al-Qaeda that was in the city. And so it was just all the time. Sometimes we'd get back to the gate and not even come back in, and they would just send us the grid for the next one with like a 1-slide thing. It'd be like, hey, you're going here next.
So for people listening, what all entails into a target package?
Sure, we'll just have, hey, where you're going to go, kind of the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, and then hopefully what we're trying to find there. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But yeah, so you get these packages, and they would come from either we generate them ourselves, or they'd come from some other entity from all over the place. It might be you're working in a battle space, and that battle space has been hit by some roadside bomb, some IEDs, and they figure out who the person is. They'd like you to go get them. Very rarely is it like there's hostages out there. That's not really a thing that happens very often. It's usually just hey, we think there's some bad guys here. Why don't you guys go wrap them up and we'll move on to the next thing. It became kind of like police operations where you're just going out, trying to roll the next person into the next thing and find the next person, and just keep going like that.
So that first time that you remember, whenever they were shooting at you, when you guys entered the house,
Sure.
what happened after that? So you take fire, you take contact from them.
Yeah. Everybody starts shooting. And then what I noticed is that, when you come into a room, it's usually 2 people, sometimes 4, is all of a sudden there was 2 more people and you're getting bumped down the wall and then 2 more and then 2 more. And all of a sudden everybody's in there because everyone wants to be a part of it.
Yeah, everybody wants to get some.
Right. And then, of course, the bad guys get killed and then you're like, okay. And then everyone kind of calms down. But you just learn lots of lessons about noise and what happens and how everyone gets really amped up. And sometimes people get a little too amped up and usually just takes someone to go, hey, stop. And then, oh, okay. So just being there for each other and kind of understanding that when your adrenaline gets pumping that high, it's really hard to make good decisions. And it's really hard to do fine motor skills. So sometimes you just need to sit and chill or go off to the side for a second, take a breath, and then keep going. Excuse me.
So after that's kind of the first memory that sticks out on the deployment with contact. And after that, after you got done, what were you thinking? Were you like, oh, okay, I did it. We're in here now. We're doing the job. If that was the first time you're taking fire and returning fire?
No, you're just like, oh yeah, I guess that's what that is now. No matter how hard you trained, it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And you're like, okay, we can do this, and you just kind of learn some lessons, right? But I talk to people all the time, and I always say that war is easier than real life because war has some rules, and if you follow most of them, you'll be okay most of the time. There's things that are out of your control. If you drive over a bomb, there's nothing you can do. But if you follow the rules, you'll probably be okay most of the time. If you're training all the time, if you have the right gear, if you're preparing, if you're thinking about what you're going to do, you're probably going to be okay. And so the more you do it, the more skilled you get at it, and I shouldn't say easier, the more prepared you are for the next time.
So during that time frame, so with Team 3 and then after being the instructor at Bud's, a total of 4 deployments?
So I did 10 deployments
Or just with Team 3?
I did 3 with Team 3.
3 with Team 3? So during that time frame, did you take any injuries or anything?
Sure. During training, I took a really good fall out of we were doing a VBSS, and I fell out of the boat. I was the first person up the boat or up the ladder. I can't remember if the hook broke or I think the boat broke. So what happens is we send up an extendable pole. It's got a hook on it with a caving ladder attached to it. I think what happened is it got hooked on a cable on the ship, and then the cable broke while I was up top, and I just fell back into the boat, all the way back down on my back.
Do you remember how high it was?
It was good distance. It was at least 25 feet.
So whenever it broke and you fell, did it go in slow motion? Like, oh,
It was like
I'm
like
falling.
this. Like I heard it snap, and I heard myself hit the boat, and I just knocked me out. Everyone told me I was snoring immediately, right into a concussion. So I don't remember like an hour after that.
So did you come to in the hospital or?
No, I came to it when we were driving back. I just woke up and was like, whoa, we're a lot closer now. But yeah, I got hurt that time.
Did they check you out after that, or did you just keep on rocking and rolling?
I think I probably went and I'm sure I went somewhere, got checked, but no one really cared about traumatic brain injury or concussions.
And this is in the 90s still.
Yeah. That one is just something that happened. Yeah.
It's like I brush it off, walk it off.
No, but that was a really good one. I got my bell rung there. And I bonked my head a couple times other times, but that was really the first time I got really smacked pretty good, was falling into the boat.
And so that was the only real significant kind of injury you took at Team 3?
I think so. I think I got some stitches maybe from some other stuff. We do lots of things where you're fighting each other, and I think I might have taken something to the mouth, maybe a butt stock or something.
Fighting your buddies or fighting?
No, in training, yeah, like, hey, we're going to run around and fight each other. And I think I got hit with an MP5 or something in the mouth.
At least it was a cool gun you got hit with.
Sure, yeah. As other people have been hitting with like hooligan tools, the big breaching things. I've seen people get whacked with those before too. But luckily, a lot of people would get hurt fast roping, sliding down the rope, because you're wearing a lot of weight. It's really easy to hurt yourself. See a lot of people get hurt doing that.
Yeah, a lot of snapped ankles.
Well, especially in ships, right? Because the ship's moving up and down also. And you're coming down with body armor on. The guys that are wearing the saw, someone has a chainsaw or a quick saw on their back, or an acetylene torch, plus your body armor, plus all your ammo and your gun, you're coming down hard. And if the boat's moving, you're going to you get worked. So
Did you see anybody just eat it?
Oh, yeah.
When you guys are fast forward
Oh, yeah,
down?
lots of times.
Everybody's laughing at them.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. When you laugh at them is when you're in the boat and you're chasing the other boat, and everyone, you have to hold on, right? If someone falls, you can't let go to help them, so everyone just looks and watches you bounce on the bottom until you can get yourself back up. Those are the funniest ones.
Oh man. So you did those tours with Team 3, and so why did you become a BUDS instructor? Were you just looking for a break, or did they assign you to BUDS, or how'd that happen?
The timing was kind of like that. So I did a couple platoons at Team 3, and then what would happen then is you'd work in the training department. There wasn't like an overarching training for all the teams at that time. So I did that for a little bit, and then I was just ready for a break. So went over to...
How are you feeling? Were you just the tempo? You're just deployment, come back, training, deployment? Like,
I liked it. I was just kind of over it. And honestly, I was going to get out. I was like, I'm going to go.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to go to BUDS. I'm going to figure stuff out. I might go to school. And then when I'm done with BUDS, I'm going to get out. I was kind of done with it.
so why were you done?
We just weren't really doing that much. I was like, hey, I'd rather go do something else.
And this is mid-90s.
Yeah. This is like 90, 99, I think.
And so there's a little bit going on in the Middle East, but I guess obviously you guys didn't know that they were going to ramp up a war anytime soon.
No. I mean, and we did like the shipboarding thing. You know, a couple guys would call CAS occasionally, but like it wasn't. I was bored. I was like, this isn't. You know, I was like that thing was cool, but they were stopping the shipboardings, and that was really all anyone was doing. You know, like, and you have to remember, like from Vietnam until like Black Hawk Down, nothing happened. And
Yeah,
then,
Mogadishu.
and then that happened. There wasn't really anything until Afghanistan.
Wow.
And so I was like, this is cool. It's a good thing, but I'm going to move on. And so that's what I did. I went to BUDS, and I was like, I'm just going to do my time here and then figure out a way to do something else.
Wow. So what were you, after having that experience, you're walking into BUDS and taking that command with the idea of getting out, what were you thinking about doing?
I wasn't sure. I was like, I might go finish school.
A tattoo artist, you know?
Sure, exactly. Exotic dancer, whatever. You know?
You'd be a good dancer. I've seen you in a wetsuit. You'd be
There we
good.
go, you know? But no, I really didn't know. I was like, I'm just ready for something else. You know, I'd done it for a couple of years. I was like, I don't know if I want to go back and do more of the same. But then, you know, when one morning I remember driving in to work, and, you know, 9/11 was happening. And so that kind of changed everything.
So that was actually going to be my next question. So you were driving to work whenever the news broke about 9/11.
Yep, the first tower was hit, and then I remember I got in and we watched the other ones on TV. I was coming in early, and that's like changed everything. Like they decided they needed Rumsfeld was the
Secretary of Defense.
Yep, he decided, hey, we need more SOF, so he wanted more SEAL teams, and he said, Marine Corps, you're going to be in it now, and so he kind of forced MARSOC on the Marine Corps. He's like, hey, we need more.
Yeah.
And so that all started, and then so we got more SEAL teams. So SEAL Team 7 on the West Coast and SEAL Team 10 on the East Coast were commissioned. They started filling those up. They started changing the way that we trained, because what they didn't want was for one team to meet up with another team downrange and not be able to work together.
Right.
And so they started this big training command that would teach everybody. Remember I talked in the beginning, when you're a new SEAL, you would get trained by your team. Well, now there was an East and West Coast group that were all the same. They train everybody the same. So if you're from Team 2 and you're going to, which was on the East Coast, and come to the West Coast, you could jump in and be okay, which is before was not the case. And so that really changed the way the teams worked. The teams, when I was started, we would leave in a platoon, which is like 16 dudes, and you'd have a couple officers and a bunch of enlisted dudes. When the wars kicked off, we'd send an entire SEAL team. So like everybody would go, 150 SEALs plus 300 support folks. So it really changed the whole dynamic. We became more like a Ranger battalion, like just a big pile of dudes would go. So that changed the way everything worked. And so I remember distinctly like the CO being like, hey, you know, we're about to kick off these things. If you want to leave early, you can. And so I did. I left being a BUDS instructor. I was there for 2 years, supposed to be 3. And I left to go back, and I ended up deploying with Team 1.
Were you just itching to get out of there?
Everybody was.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So how quick was that ramp up? I mean, 9/11 happens in September of 01. How quick was that ramp up to where you could start seeing the difference in your level at the Navy?
Yeah, no, it started really ramping up. A lot of money started getting dumped in. Everyone was worried about biochemical stuff, so that was all the rage in the beginning before both of those was to get everyone trained up on all that. So
All the mop suit training.
all that stuff, right? Lots of it. Cutting them out, doing the vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So that was a big ramp up. And then Team 3 did the invasion for both, for Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow.
But when those guys were coming back, there just wasn't that much. They'd roll into these different places, and everyone would just be like, "Hey, throw up their hands, we're good." It wasn't until much later that it started getting a little bit more spicy. For sure.
Because they moved through the invasion of Iraq pretty quickly, didn't they?
Super fast.
So you were there during the initial invasion?
I wasn't. So I was still at Buds when that was happening. So I came and I went with SEAL Team 1, and that was their first deployment to Iraq. So we turned over with the guys that had done the invasion.
So how was that first deployment?
It was pretty wild because it was still
Lawless.
very lawless, not a lot of bases yet. So there's still, there wasn't walls around anything. Everything was just like concertina wire, like barbed wire.
And how many guys are you running with when you were out there?
So the whole team went, right? So they broke up the platoons all over the place, and so you just kind of spread out. But we stayed, I think on that first deployment, we stayed in the green zone or in Baghdad proper. But it just depended. Guys were flown all over the place. It just depended where people needed to go.
Mm-hmm. So what was your kind of mission while you were during that invasion? Once you got there, what that op tempo looked like for you? What were you doing?
It was pretty slow for that part because they would just move from places. And really, when those big military movements are happening, you don't need SOF, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of tanks and artillery and lots of Marines and lots of soldiers that can do all that heavy lifting. We're in the way, honestly, with our. We come up with a 50 cal and they're like, seriously, I got a tank. What are you guys doing? So we're like, no, we're over here. We're super special. Like, yeah, we got you. You guys hang out.
See our beards? Look how cool we are.
We're cool. We got patches and stuff, and Velcro, But no, they don't really need you in the beginning. So it's not until more specific things where the larger forces have trouble is when they go to get a specific person. Because it takes a long time to get everyone ready. Not super fast at getting to those spots. Hard to get 20, 30 Humvees onto a very specific location in Baghdad. And so that's where all SOF kind of excelled, where, it didn't matter what flavor, we're able to go in and, get those
move pretty quick,
high value targets quickly without alerting everyone that you're coming. And so that's where SOF across the board really excelled in both locations that we could go do those things. Whereas the larger groups weren't really able to do it. They'd go into places and kind of hold. And then the more little surgical stuff would happen through whatever SOF version.
So during that deployment, Team 1, right?
Yep.
So during that deployment, you guys are in the green zone in Baghdad, and then that'd be you'd operate out of that, you'd move out of Baghdad, do an op, and then come back?
Right, and so we had a small camp at the airfield, and it was called BIAF, Baghdad International Airport, and then we moved into the green zone. What happened was about halfway through our deployment, so that was MARSOC's first deployment.
Oh,
they
really?
deployed with Team 1. And so we were together with the very first MARSOC guys. So
How was that?
It was great. There was a bunch of force guys that they had kind of pulled in, and they're like, hey, we're going to do this. They didn't have a lot of senior guys, senior officers, I should say. So they fell under SEAL Team 1.
How was that cohesion? I mean, you have these force guys, and then coming in with the team.
We're in the same camp.
Yeah.
They were so new to SOF that they really had a hard time. Like they didn't know they knew how it worked within the Marine Corps proper, but not how it worked within like SOCOM to do planning and get ops and get funding and all that stuff. So it was like we were in the 80s when the Army would just slap us around, be like, yeah, you guys are super cool in the water. That's cool.
Yeah.
But that's what MARSOC experienced when we first went there. And so we would trade off doing operations. We were actually in a camp with the GROM, which is the Polish Special Forces, and we would trade off with those guys. And so they didn't have a lot of night gear. They didn't have like super high speed, night vision, and have vehicles. And so we'd swap. And so they would drive for us one night, and we'd go do raids, and they'd get out. And we'd switch. So then we'd drive for them. And so we'd go back and forth. And the MARSOC guys didn't. I don't think they did that rotation with them at first, but they were kind of doing their own thing. But we were all just kind of sitting around. They'd pass out ops, and we'd go do it. And about halfway through that, they had started the new government for Iraq. And they're like, okay, we're gonna make this person the president.
Because they threw out Saddam.
Saddam's gone.
And so was this kind of America installed?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
And so they get this first dude in there. Within the first week, he gets blown up. He's dead. And they're like, okay.
And this sets the tone for the next
Right.
20 years.
Right. And so then they go, okay, we're going to put in these new guys. We got a new prime minister, 2 VPs. I think there was 5 heads of state. And they're like, okay, here's 5 new ones, but they all need PSD, protective service details. SEAL teams, you guys are in charge. And that's what happened. So like SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Team 2 were in Iraq, and we took over security for all those guys.
So you were running protective
Details.
during that time frame.
Yep. That's
How
what we
was that?
switched to. We hated it. We were all like, hey, we want to do this other thing while we run around
I
these
got to
guys.
protect this dickhead? What am I doing?
Exactly. Nobody liked it. But it was a super good learning. I mean, like we learned so much. Like no one had ever done that. Like people hadn't done protective details in combat zones. So like we'd have Secret Service guys come hang out, and they're like, oh, we don't really do this. We would lock down the whole neighborhood. We're like, we can't do that though.
Yeah.
So it's different. A lot of learning, a lot of traveling, but a lot of sitting around. But
wow. So not to jump around too much, but what do you think about the incident that happened in Benghazi with those guys running that protective detail?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's horrible, right? I mean, it's a bad spot when the whole city kind of rises up against you. It's tough, man. I mean, it's horrible. They were definitely left out there without enough support, for sure.
Thanks, Hillary. So you're running the protective details out there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that the rest of your time?
The rest of that deployment we did, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, so we'd bounce around. So we all got kind of split up. Mm-hmm. So like my group had the president. So we were the president's guy, and so we would just rotate. So it was me. We were with him 24 hours.
Did he speak English?
Time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
How was he? What was that like?
He was a dirtbag. Yeah. Total dirtbag. Total dirtbag.
Oh man, how so? Tell me about it.
Oh, we would have like, so they funded them, right? So they all had like artificially been funded by us, right, to do their things. And they would have things like bringing a bunch of hookers, and we'd have to like bring them in, We'd call it Hooker Thursday because Friday's like Saturday, right? So Thursday's the Friday night. So they'd try to sneak them in. It was a whole weird thing. Or like he'd have his guys that were
like his Iraqi guys,
right,
in the protective service.
Mm-hmm. And he'd sometimes want to do secret stuff like bring in chicks like that. We'd be like, seriously, So he was just kind of slimy, he wasn't very nice. He was kind of a dirtbag, but
just kind of like a prince that was just given all this money, and now he's just running amok with SEAL Team 1 protecting him.
Absolutely. Funded by the State Department. So like it was kind of icky, but we'd learned a ton. We got to travel a bunch. Like you would go, like he's like, I want to go to this spot. And so we'd go. And then they started traveling Europe. And so
really?
Like, hey, you guys are going with them. And so like I went to like Belgium, NATO.
So during your deployment to Iraq, he wants to go to Europe.
Yeah.
And so you just detach out of the Middle East and go to Europe.
Yeah.
What?
Tell
me about that.
They would like get us a plane, get us stuff.
Like a private plane?
Sometimes they would pay, because they had one. It just depended on if when they were using it. So they had a private small plane that they would fly around, and sometimes they use that. Sometimes, like Reagan died while we were on deployment. We flew, a couple of us went to the funeral.
Really? Did you go?
Yep.
How was that?
It was pretty incredible. It's a big program, but the craziest thing was we brought like I don't know if it was a C-130. It might have been a C-130, some type of I can't remember which, but they rolled in this trailer, and it looked like an Airstream thing, and you open it up, and it's like a luxury kind of accommodations inside this military aircraft for them. I'm like, where did this thing come from? I've never even seen this thing. What do these guys get? So anyways, that thing flew into DC. We went to the thing, and then we came back. But we did a bunch of trips like that. We went to like NATO. We went to the UN.
So you went to the funeral because the president at the time was going.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. So how is it going to Europe watching this guy?
It was a trip. I mean, we'd go to places like we went to France. So it was me and an EOD guy.
Yeah.
We went first with his like charge d'affaires, which is like his senior person that kind of speak for him, and he'd have like a briefcase full of cash and like a black Amex card. And so we go to this hotel in Paris, and we're like, hey, we need to take over this floor. So they spend a ridiculous amount of money. So we do all that. So we're doing all the preparatory like security stuff. And so we meet with like the French Secret Service, and we do all the stuff to bring them in. They come in, there's like 80 people that want to come with them. They all want their own cars.
Just his whole entourage.
It's like a motorcade, all these guys. They want to come in and do things. So we're there for like, I think a week before to kind of prep this thing. And a French journalist got kidnapped. And so the night before they're supposed to come, the president, who's slimy, canceled the trip because he didn't want to get hit by all the press in France. So we had like rented out this whole floor, like done all this prep. We had leased a hangar for the plane.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane.
All the logistics to move him from Iraq.
Yep.
Oh wow.
It's just funny. And and then they're like, I remember me and the EOD guy were the last ones there because they're like, hey, we're going to go to Belgium. You guys take a train to Belgium. Okay. So I go to see like the hotel manager we're working with, and he's like, hey, when's His Excellency coming? I'm like, and there's no Iraqis there because they didn't want to tell him he's not coming now. I'm like, he's not coming. Like they had come in and like the main bedroom palace thing that he was going to stay in, he didn't like the color. So they had repainted, put in extra AC, put in extra TVs.
This is a floor of a hotel?
This is like rooms and a whole floor of a hotel, probably the most expensive hotel in
And
Paris.
they redid the floor for this guy.
Yeah, all this stuff. I mean, they spent so much money. Yeah, this is crazy. And then we had to tell him, hey, he's not coming.
Wow. So did he ever go?
I don't
Because
think
was
so.
it just a vacation to Europe? Is that what he wanted to do?
No, he was like going around and seeing. I mean, he wanted to see other heads of state, right? He's the
okay.
president now, so he's going to go meet other people and do his thing. And so
Wow. So that happens. What happens next?
I think we went to Belgium then. A
Just
couple
meeting heads of
spots.
state?
Yeah, like we'd go and he'd do like a press conference and hang out.
So were you just plain clothes,
Yeah.
concealed carrying at the time?
No,
or-
you can't do that overseas. So as soon as we would get into the other country, like the host country takes over security. So like the French police would take over.
So what were you doing in Belgium?
Just hanging out. Same thing in France, just hanging out.
How was that? I mean, you're in the middle of this deployment to the Middle East. You deploy. Then they're like, hey, Rob, you guys are going to be on security detail. Now you're in Belgium.
No, I didn't even have luggage. Like I was in the green zone. I had to like go out in town and go find rolling luggage to take my stuff. I didn't have any of that. You know what I mean? We had to buy suits and all kinds of stuff. It was crazy, super surreal. Because you'd like leave Baghdad and then land in Europe, you know, and then go back or go to another country. Some guys are going to Switzerland. It just depends on like where their head of state wanted to go.
So during this time frame when you were doing that, were you thinking, oh, this is pretty cool. I mean, I could do this, or did you want to get back to regular ops?
No, I wanted to get out of it for sure.
Yeah.
Because you're just doing press events. It's exhausting for sure. I mean, those are super long days, standing outside doors. You know, it's long days, and they didn't ever want to tell them no. And we're not going to say, hey, we're not going to do this trip. So everything they wanted to do, we would go do every trip.
Wow. So we'll get back to the deployment timeline in a second, but
Uh-huh.
I mean, you ran security details and you're jumping around internationally. There was a assassination attempt on Trump recently.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about that whole situation? I mean, there's a lot of details coming out. What do you think failed? What do you think happened there?
It looks like people were just kind of lackadaisical about the area. Like, honestly, I haven't spent any time looking
Yeah.
at all the behind-the-scenes stuff, but for someone to be able to shoot on American soil is horrifying. So it just feels like there's definitely a lack of, attention to detail for sure for that day. And I don't know that much about it. I haven't talked to anybody about it, so I'm no expert. But
Yeah.
for it to happen at all is horrifying.
Wow. And so you were interacting with Secret Service while you were in Iraq?
Yeah, absolutely.
What were they doing out there?
Same thing. They'd come help when heads of state would come from the states. They're going to get Secret Service or State Department security. DSS folks will come and provide security for them, drive around.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's a wild story.
Well, it's funny because all those guys were managed by contractors, right? Blackwater.
Oh, so how was it working with the
Iraqis got
Blackwater
U.S.
guys?
forces. Well, I mean, there's a weird hierarchy that would happen because they're like, well, we're State Department. Like, I don't care. You can fire me tomorrow. I'll go back to doing my job. you know?
Yeah.
So it was fine. They just did their own thing. I knew lots of them. They're all ex something, so they're getting paid way more than we were.
Wow. So you're on the security detail. You're taking little mini vacations in Europe and Belgium.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm guessing that eventually ends at security detail and you go back to ops, or do you, when that ends, you go back home?
No, we turned over with the next teams. So we did that until we left our whole deployment. So the second half of our deployment. So I think it was like 3 or 4 months.
And so it was only a certain group of guys from your team that were running that security detail?
All the team, the whole team. So
Really?
we were just split up on different heads of state.
Wow. So
There was there might have been like one platoon out of everybody that didn't do it.
and so this is post 9/11 now
Mhm.
that we're in.
Yep.
So you get back,
Mhm.
and I'm guessing you're blowing off some steam, going through training, another workup.
Yep.
How was that next deployment? Where'd you go?
It was good. One weird thing. So when we started doing the PSD mission, no one had done it before in NSW. Like there was a couple small groups that had done it. So they wanted to be able to train the next guys. So a couple of us that were on some of the details, they're like, hey, you guys need to fly back to Coronado and give like a 1 week we're going to train these guys. So everyone doesn't have to do like we did, which is learn on the fly. And so they're like, hey, Rob, you're going. And like 2 other guys went. So we left from Baghdad and flew directly, like I think we landed in Germany and then, bumped into San Diego. So I remember getting into San Diego and I was still on Iraq time. My brain's Iraq time. And I had to get a rental car because it was like out in the desert wherever they were going. I was married at the time, but my wife was staying with her mom, I think. Anyway, so I get to the airport, get a rental car, and I just start driving. And I'm driving like we drove in Iraq when we would go under overpasses. So like you'd go under overpasses early on, and they would hang IEDs off like strings and ropes and like swing them down. And so when you
Just
went in,
waiting.
yeah, they'd be up on the overpass. And so what you would do is you'd go in one spot, and then once you got under, you'd swerve one way or the other so that they couldn't hit you.
Yeah.
Well, I did that on I-5, like, downtown. Came out, I'm going like 100 miles an hour in this car, and I had to stop. I'm like, whoa, I need to like check myself.
Wow.
It was crazy. Like, it's really hard to make that switch. I think it was 18 hours, from being in Baghdad to being in San Diego.
And whenever you're out there in Baghdad or deployed downrange, you're operating at this level 10.
Sure.
And then you come back here.
Right.
And you're driving 100 miles and
Right.
doing defensive driving on I-5.
Right. Exactly. And so now, after a bunch of us did that, they're like, hey, we need to change that. They switched it to where you'd stop. They have third country stops now where you go to Germany for a week and a half and blow up steam before you come back. So it's much better. But that was one of the super shocking to me, is like when I realized I was doing that, like, oh, I got to slow down.
So was that the first time you got back from a deployment and you noticed yourself that you had changed or that you were operating in a certain tempo, and you come back to the States and you're like, whoa.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like deployment Rob and then, being at home Rob. And they had like merged for sure. They hadn't had a chance to like downshift like you're talking about.
And so you're married at it. So did you meet your wife after 9/11?
No, before.
Before?
Yep.
How'd you meet her?
At another team guy's wedding.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you just struck up a conversation?
We started a conversation. We dated, and then we got married in 2000. Yeah, 2000. I got divorced later on, but we got, but yeah. And then, so when I went on that deployment, she had gone back because I had a son that was 1, and they went back and hung out with her folks while I was on deployment. So when I came back, like I said, I get there, I'm swerving around, and then there's no family there. So I'm just like, kind of losing my mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did she know that deployment Rob was still there when you got back?
Yeah,
Did you
I
talk
told
to
her
about it?
Yeah, yeah.
How
But
was
she
that?
knew I was only going to be there for a week, so she didn't come home. So because I think it was like 5 days, and then I flew back. I had to go back to Iraq because the deployment wasn't over yet.
So when you went back, you're just running the security detail, wrapping it up,
Yep.
doing turnover.
That's right. Yep. And the other teams had come, and then we did turnover for a while. I think that was it. I remember the very last helicopter flight we're in on that deployment. We're leaving from one spot and going to another, and it's a new crew. I think it was a Navy crew. And the guys we're talking on the headsets just like we are now, and he's like, hey, it looks like someone's throwing chem lights at me. I'm like, those aren't chem lights, those are tracers. He's like, oh, and he starts shooting. I'm like, it was like I was in a movie. It's kind of funny.
He was just so relaxed. He's like, oh, that's weird. Oh my
Those aren't chem lights, dude. Those are tracers. It's okay to shoot back.
Wow. So what was that like getting back? So now you're back.
Mm-hmm.
Was that blurred line from how you're operating on the deployment back in the States? Was that still there? You still had to try and conform back?
No, for sure. It's always tough. It's tough to come back, and all of a sudden, like I said, it's easier to be gone. Then now you come back, you have other things to worry about and things that you kind of haven't worked on while you were gone. And so getting back and being in a family and being a good father and husband is definitely challenging for sure. Because really, for me, I was like, okay, when's the next time we're training so I can get back and do my stuff.
And
so,
you're pretty young at this time. So around 2001, around this deployment, you're early 20s?
late 20s.
Late 20s?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so you're a new father.
Uh-huh.
You're on deployment. How was that? Like, because obviously you have to be a certain type of man on these deployments. And then when you get back, how was it trying to decompress and then be a dad? How was that?
The part with being a dad was easier. Like being able to reconnect with my wife was harder for sure. You can just kind of grow apart. At least for me, it's hard to talk on the phone, especially those early deployments. Like later on, you could talk every night if you wanted to on a cell phone or on a phone there. But early on, you'd have to use a sat phone or get on some other special phone to be able to talk. So you didn't talk very often. So it was a little bit harder to stay connected. There wasn't email that much. That didn't happen until later. But definitely harder, I thought, like getting back in with a spouse, I felt like after deployment than with kids. Kids are like just stoked to see you, and want to hang out. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned earlier with that wife, you eventually got divorced. Was that, if you don't mind me asking, was that kind of the reason, just drifting apart, deployment tempos?
Sure. No, so I retired from the Navy in 2015, got divorced the same year. So
She's like, hey, you're home all the time now.
this is bullshit, Yeah, we had never been. So like in my last deployment, I got injured, was in IED, got rocked, had to spend some time in Bethesda. But when I came back, and we started hanging out. That was the first time we'd been around each other ever. I'd never been home for a year straight ever. Then we've been married
For
never,
15 years.
never. And so like all of a sudden we're around each other for 2 years, and it was just done. So yeah, so like literally, we got divorced the same year.
So she was married to you from 2000, or when you met her in 2000.
Yep.
You guys were together all the way up until around 2015.
Yep.
Wow.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So going back to that timeline, you got back from that deployment where you run security detail.
Uh-huh.
What was that next deployment like?
That was much more kinetic. So that's when like Fallujah had kicked off.
So this is around 2004,
Yeah, I think so.
2003.
Something like that. And then we went to Ramadi, my group did. So we were in Ramadi for the whole time. So super kinetic.
So this was like during the Battle of Ramadi.
That was just finishing. Like it still went on, but like the big Battle of Ramadi where Bruiser and that whole, that we relieved all those guys from that. And so there was still a lot of that going on all the time. And so that was much different because that little base we were on got attacked every day. They'd get rocketed every time you left. There was IEDs everywhere. So it was much different. It wasn't, it was just much more serious, I guess, for sure.
So you got a couple deployments under your belt at this point. What was that turnover like with Bruiser and getting in there and realizing, oh, this is different? What was that like?
It's just totally different. Every single time it would be different. We'd think it was going to be like last time, and it wasn't. But that was just, everyone was kind of excited. They're like, oh, there's lots of things happening. We're not going to be bored. There's going to be stuff to do. But it's just hard. It's a grind like everything else. You're doing stuff every night, trying to get up. At that time also, they were trying to empower the tribes. And so there was a lot of, hey, let's go. This is the first time we started doing like tribal engagement where we'd go out and sit down with the sheikhs, the local folks, and get them involved in security instead of us trying to beat everybody up. I don't mean NSW. I mean like all of U.S. forces. Mm-hmm. They're like, hey, let's get the locals involved. And so that's really where all that started, it was called the Awakening. They were trying to get like all the local sheikhs in and around Ramadi to kind of come together and kind of be like, hey, let's stop letting, these people that want to do harm into our town. Because it wasn't the people that lived there, really. It was people from out of town, people coming from other countries that were coming in, foreign fighters. A lot of that was happening in Ramadi. And so they wanted to kind of, try a different tact, which was get everybody else involved too. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of that on that deployment.
Mm-hmm. So during this deployment, were there any close calls or anything like that you were in? For
sure. We had a couple IED strikes, but we had one really bad house that we went into that ended up being booby-trapped. Went into the house, cleared it, found no males, which is strange. There's 6 or 8 females and lots of kids. Ended up there was a tunnel and a whole fake underground little bunker underneath there. When we found it, they came out swinging.
This is at night?
Yep, outside of Ramadi. We got in a big gunfight. Went on and on and on for a long time.
Were you down in the tunnels when the gunfight started, or?
We were about to go into the tunnel. We opened up a little hatch to go in there, and a grenade came out. The EOD guy pushed it back down and went down in the hole.
Get that shit out of here.
It detonated in there, yeah. But then we did a call, which I've only ever heard once, called avalanche, which means everyone get out of the house, dive out the windows. And so I heard that call, and so you've never heard that ever except in training. So everyone left, got back to the vehicles, and just got to do a big, prolonged, I should say, gunfight with the house.
Wow.
So it turned out there's a bunch of foreign fighters, people coming across the border from Syria. When we did the SSE, the sensitive site exploitation, there was like fake passport making stuff. They had all kinds of hard drives. They were trying to shoot the hard drives when we came in so we wouldn't get it. They had a bunch of weapons like ours. It was clearly that it had come from like Hezbollah and some other stuff, through Syria and Lebanon. So it was a little bit scary. That was one of the scarier ones. It was a really longest one I've ever been in. It was like 20 or 30 minutes that it went on.
So why'd they call avalanche? If they were only in the tunnel, were they coming from other buildings around?
We didn't know if they were just going to blow the whole thing. Yeah.
So you get back out and the gunfight starts. Did you work your way back in and back down into the tunnel to check it out, or?
Nope, we dropped a JDAM on it.
The easiest way to do CQB.
Yeah, just bigger bomb.
Yeah.
No, because what happened was when the gunfight kind of stopped, as all the guys were dying or dead, they would roll over. They were pulling pins on grenades and rolling over on them. So if you touched them, we caught one guy doing that. We just backed off, and then they dropped. We found that they had there was a giant cache of weapons and mines and all kinds of stuff underneath. So when we dropped the JDAM on it, there was like a secondary explosion that was almost as big as the aircraft, so or as the ordnance that came from the aircraft. It was pretty crazy. Then they dropped another one.
How close were you whenever they dropped it?
We were pretty far.
Oh, okay.
We backed off because there's nobody. They wanted, at first they were like, hey, let's go down and search that bunker, and then they assumed that it was booby trapped because we caught them doing all that, so they just made the call to drop some ordnance on it, which I preferred. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be easy if you could just do that every time.
Well, it was open out in the middle of nowhere. There's no other people around. We're not hitting other buildings. It's just that building, so makes sense.
So up until this point, so it sounds like, in knowing that time frame around 2003, 2004, the Battle of Ramadi. Speaking of which, before I get into that, because I loved Marine Corps history and military history during that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Were they dropping pamphlets before that Battle of Ramadi, saying, "Hey, get out"?
Yep. Fallujah also.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, they had all kinds of pamphlets. They'd be, hey, it's time to leave. They would do it all the time. Honestly, it wasn't just once. The PSYOPs folks dropped those leaflets all the time.
And so, what were those leaflets saying? What were they, just to describe it?
They would say, if you have people in your house, you should tell them to leave. If we are going to come, so you should leave. Don't bring out guns. They would have very specific instructions. It would say Iraq is in power now. You should leave. These insurgents are trying to hurt you. There's all different versions. There's a whole bunch of different ones. It's pretty interesting.
That is interesting. That was the thing that stuck. I was like, they were just ready to go and swing. And that's letting you know, hey, if you're still here by this date, you're the enemy.
Right. Yep.
Wow. So up until this point, had you lost anybody in the teams, or?
Yeah, a couple times. Not too many, thankfully. It wasn't like Ramadi. There was a couple, and then it kind of ramped up from there. But it had been few and far between. We'd had a guy that had fast roped onto a mine in Afghanistan and was killed, and then Red Wings happened. That was all pre-Iraq. And then Iraq, it wasn't until the Bruiser deployment that we lost quite a few, 3 guys.
Anybody that you knew?
Yeah, I knew who they were. You kind of know everybody, but they were a little bit younger than me, so that we weren't buddies. But yeah, for sure, no.
Was there anybody at this time point or later on that you knew that that you guys lost that impacted you, or?
Yeah, for sure. I had a buddy that I had been buds instructors with, and we were like climbing partners with. His name's Brant. We were like best buddies, and when I told you I was going to get out, and I went back to the teams, he went with Triple Canopy, which was a contracting company in Baghdad. And he was working in Basra, which is the southernmost town that the Brits kind of held. And they got hit by an IED out in town, and he died from the IED. That was before contractors could get QRF. So if contractors got into contact,
No QRF.
no, nobody would go. And so he died on the side of the road. But later on, they kind of made the choice. They're like, hey, these are other Americans, and not Americans, could be Brits or Aussies or South Africans. There's all kinds of people that are contractors over there. They would go launch QRF if they didn't have their own to go kind of help out.
Were you able to go back for his funeral? Or?
I didn't. No, I missed it. We were on deployment. I went back later and saw like his family and stuff. I had a bunch of pictures. It was pretty cool.
So during that time frame, after that period in that house, what was the rest of that tempo like that you guys running ops? Was it more not snatching and grabbing people, hit packages, or target packages, but it was, what was that like?
That was much different because we were really trying to go with locals, right? So if we were going to go do something, we would do it with the Ramadi police.
How was the Ramadi police at that point? Were they?
They were one of the better ones. Like the General Army guys would have ADs, NDs all the time. They would rob people. We'd be in a house, and all of a sudden they'd have all the jewelry in their pockets, all their cell phones. You're like, dudes, come on, stop. Yeah. The cops didn't do that as much. There was definitely the Army guys that would do that more. It got better as the Army Special Forces, the SF guys, like trained up their version of Special Forces, and so we got to start doing stuff with them, and they were better. They'd been vetted and stuff, but like the general purpose folks, they didn't want to be there. But we'd go into a house, and it'd be like 2 of us and 10 of them, or 2 of us and 20 of them, and they'd be in the kitchen, like going through the groceries, like drinking the milk out of the thing, like, hey, this is their, stop it,
And then there's 10 of them, or 2 of you and 20 of them.
Yeah.
And that's really all you can do at that point. Hey guys, don't do that.
Stop. Yeah.
And they're like, No.
But it kind of got to that. At first, it'd be like half us and half them, and it would kind of trim down a little bit to where it wasn't all just Americans or all Brits or all whoever was there.
So how did that deployment end? So it seems like it was pretty fast paced for that deployment. How did it wrap up as you guys were winding down?
Kind of just like the other ones, just someone comes out and you're doing ops, and then they go, oh, the other team's going to be here. They're there usually for, what happens is the head shed will come out and they'll stay for like 2 weeks, and then the crew comes out and they're there for, you might do one turnover op with the other group if there happens to be one, and then you leave and that's it. And so I remember that after that one, we went to Germany and got to hang out for a little bit, which was nice.
Nice.
What we'd done before is fly back to California and then go do like Disneyland or something, which is fine for me with kids, but like all these single dudes are like, what am I doing in Disneyland? I don't want to be here. So
Oh, so the whole team would like go to like a
like
trip to
mandatory, yeah, like we're gonna go do mandatory fun. But no, we went to Germany and then home, so it was good.
So coming back from that, we talked about the other deployment where you noticed a difference about you back in the States now. How was it coming back home after doing that for 6 months?
I think that was like 8. But
months.
yeah, it was the same. I was always just ready to get back in the group. You'd come home and you'd get like 30 days off, which they're always really good about in Naval Special Warfare. Is you'd come back and you have 30 days off. You don't need to come in. You don't need to do anything. No check-in, and that's pretty good. But after about that, you're kind of ready to get back. Get back to work, whatever it's going to be. And that's how I always was. And by 3 or 4 months back, I'd be like, hey, I want to get back. And so early on, you could do that. Like if someone got hurt or they needed extra people, you could just deploy as many times as you wanted. Like all the teams are on the same street and be like, hey, Team 7 needs some guys. Hey, Team 3 needs some guys. And you can just go and deploy. Just if you wanted to be gone, you could be for sure.
Wow. So at this point in time, you got back from that deployment. Did you start to notice, I mean, obviously when you're in it and you have this op tempo, you compartmentalize things, you're focused on doing the job, getting back out there. Did you notice at this point that you internally were changing at all? Or were you just focused on getting back out there, just doing the job?
A little bit. I definitely noticed I was way more callous, and I didn't sleep very well. Had a lot of I developed like migraines, a lot of PTSD stuff and traumatic brain injury stuff that was kind of coming up. A lot of sleep issues, and like restless leg where I'd like rip the sheets, from doing it so much at night. Had sleep apnea. Took a while for that to get diagnosed, just because they don't think skinny guys have, sleep apnea. But I remember going to take the test for it, and they're like, yeah, you almost died like 1,000 times last night, so let's get you this. Like starting to work on that stuff helped, but no, I just would keep going, was drinking too much, and then would just get ready to go again.
And I mean, and that's kind of the culture too with the drinking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. Military wide for sure. Yeah.
Did you get any TBIs on that deployment?
I don't think I did on that one.
Or were you guys doing, I'm guessing, breaching and stuff? So
No, for sure. And we had guys get hurt doing it. But I think I was pretty lucky. I don't think I got hurt on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you came back from that. Did you deploy again with Team 1 after that deployment?
Yes, I did again. Yep.
How was that one? Was it
It's
different?
good. It was different. Same thing. We went to Afghanistan.
So
It's much slower paced. Yeah.
How was that difference? Because up until this point, you hadn't been to Afghanistan.
That's right. Yeah.
So what was kind of the things you noticed about, or you're in and out of Iraq, and now you land and you get to Afghanistan?
The people we were after were different. They always wanted to fight. It was rare that anyone ever fought back in Iraq, ever. Afghanistan, that wasn't the case.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. They're just a different culture. They've been doing it forever. They've been at it for a long time.
Yeah.
But that was definitely the thing, was they were going to fight. So it was definitely a little bit different to get used to, because the other places you'd come in and everyone just threw up their hands. That was not the case there. And they would plan. You didn't ever see that really in Iraq, where they'd plan attacks for us. In Iraq, they might shoot mortars at you or rockets of some sort, but coordinated attacks where people are trying to flank you, that would happen in Afghanistan. It didn't ever really happen in Iraq that I experienced.
Do you remember kind of the first time that happened, where you got contact? You're like, oh, these guys are kind of organized.
Yeah, I mean, they would attack the camps like that. They tried to get like an L ambush going on you in the camps. You're like, whoa, they're just reading army manuals. But yeah, no, you would notice, because Afghanistan was different because it'd been going on for so long that as soon as that happened, there's Apaches in the air and they're looking for the guys. So definitely different than Iraq when it came to the way that people would respond to getting contacted like that.
Whenever you were out there in Afghanistan, what were you guys mainly doing?
Same thing, the same mission. Like that started transitioning into the same things where they would actually want groups to move into a village, like off the fob, off the fire base, into a camp or into a town with the locals to be with them to kind of fight the Taliban. So my group never did that, but that's what a lot of the groups are doing. They're getting these small groups. They'd go be in a little village with the people in there, like building up their defenses, teaching them how to fight, and then they would just kind of hold the ground there and try to help them out, especially in the more southern areas.
Do you think that advise and assist kind of tactic and things that they were starting to do in Iraq and Afghanistan, do you think that really made a difference? Was it impactful that you saw, or do you feel like as soon as you left, they just kind of fall over?
Only if you're going to stay there forever.
Yeah.
It's just impossible. Like just fuel is impossible, let alone weapons and taking care of things and a schedule of when to take care of things. Like that just doesn't exist in a lot of those places. So that part is very challenging. If you're going to stay there forever, sure. Like if you think about how the Brits used to do it, they would, just stay forever. They'd have Brits in the Indian army, or in the Pakistani army. That's how they did all that for 100 years. So that's the only way that seems to work, really.
Do you like history?
I do, yeah.
What's kind of your favorite subject? Do you like World War II history?
I do. I like the old OSS stuff, like the Jedburghs, all the kind of old CIA stuff.
So what's your opinion on, what's your take on the CIA?
What do you mean?
Do you have an opinion on the CIA as far as, I guess maybe in today's culture? Because they obviously have a very wide-reaching arm internationally.
Sure.
In operations, things they do, and protecting national security. Do you think they do that in a certain level domestically here?
I never worked with anyone here in the States, only overseas. But no, I mean, there's good people and bad people just like everywhere else.
Yeah.
Super patriotic folks, all over trying to do the same thing. Everyone I ever met was like super professional, but it's just different, right? When you're working for, if they always look different on military and we look different on, State Department or agency folks. But we always were with those, but we're always connected. Like SOF is always connected with, intelligence agencies. So we always have those folks around. There's liaisons on both sides. So we always had good relationships with them.
I was reading it might have changed names now, but they had an entire unit named Executive Action.
Okay.
And their entire unit, that entire agency or department of the agency was just focused on training and executing political assassinations.
Oh, okay.
And so it's just interesting that you have these agencies, and obviously everyone's doing it, but agencies, just to learn about it, that they have an entire training regiment and program dedicated to political assassinations.
Sure.
Internationally. Did you ever experience anything like that?
No, not at all. No. We're just doing pointy end stuff, we'd often have like meetings with those groups, and they would come over and be like, hey, here's some target packages for us. But that's really it.
Yeah. So you're in Afghanistan, and by this point, you're about 7 or 8 years in your career?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Are there any of those deployments that really stick out to you, things that happened or injuries, things like that?
Nothing in particular. I mean, what we started doing back then, too, about the time you're talking about, is we decided that we needed to it'd be better on target to have females also, especially in Afghanistan, because males can't search females, you can't touch them, you can't do anything. And so we wanted to have females go with us on missions. And so we started programs of training up females from all over, all the services that would go deploy with SOF. And so I was part of a program where we were doing an assessment, selection, and then training of folks to come on deployment. So we had teams of 2 that would go with all different groups, and we would train them. Army Special Forces would train them, and then they would get spread out to all the different groups. So everyone would, when they would go on target in Afghanistan, you would have to have a pair with you. And so that was pretty cool to be a part of that process, like grabbing folks, getting them trained up.
Wow. So it's almost like having an interpreter with you.
Yeah.
To go through training, and they're there with your team, and then you can pull them when you need them.
Yeah. No, they're just part of the team. Yep.
Wow.
And then there was another program that's been around since, I think, World War II, where if the U.S. government has a need for languages, they can enact a program called MAVNI. It's called, I can't remember the acronym now, but it's bringing in foreign nationals that we might be able to use as translators, right? So we opened up a program where you could bring in, Pakistanis, Iraqis, Afghanis, Koreans, people from Djibouti, whatever it needs to be, and they'd come through and need to get trained up. Because usually when you go on target, none of us speak Pashtun. you might be able to say a couple words, but you're not going to be able to converse. And so we would have a local person with you. Well, it'd be better to have a U.S. person with you with a security clearance and all kinds of things. So we started training up those folks to get with us also. So we would find these folks that were, typically they were students on a student visa, and we go chat them up, because as soon as you finish boot camp, you become a citizen if you're in our program. And so we did a lot of that too. So we brought people from all over the globe into these programs in the Navy, and they would get trained up, get vetted, and then we would send them out with everybody too. So both those two were together, the female program and the MAVNI program.
Oh, wow. What was that like, having, you have all these guys on the team, and then you have, say, the female that's there to say if you need to search females or things like that on target.
Sure.
How did that interact? Was it an easy mesh?
No, at first people didn't. Nobody wants somebody that didn't train with them to come with them. I don't care what you're doing or sport. If you get someone new, there's always a little bit of contention. And so we always tried really hard to train them so that they would fit in better. Like they're not going to be the same, because they're not going to be a Green Beret or a Ranger or a SEAL. But at least they're going to feel like they're part of the team. And so we spent a lot of time vetting people and then putting them through pretty serious training regimens to get them ready to be able to hold their own with everybody, whether that's shooting or moving, communicating, whatever it needed to be done. So they were very well trained, and they fit in really well. They had a lot of great success having those folks with all the troops, for sure.
Nice. What was your favorite thing about being on these deployments?
Trying some new food, hanging out. I like doing all the stuff with the locals. I like kind of getting out and seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
It's the best part about deploying is you feel like you have purpose, right? So you get to go do something, whatever it is. Your job could be fixing diesel trucks, parachuting, shooting bad guys. If you get to go actually do it, it's super rewarding. So whatever that is, you go in deployment, you're going to do that. So if you get to do that, that was always the best part. It was like you got to do whatever it was. It doesn't matter what it is. So I always enjoyed that. I felt like I was doing something meaningful and that I had a purpose. So I always loved doing it.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of guys that either in Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and they do a couple enlistments and they get out and they're really disgruntled about it for that kind of exact reason. They didn't get a chance to deploy or do that. And I kind of felt that because I was lucky that I got to deploy and go to Iraq in 2017. And at this point, because I was training as a corpsman and then with the Marine Corps the whole time, and kind of what you were talking about, I finally got to do my job when you get out there.
Sure.
Because now I'm working on amputees, Iraqis, gunshot wounds, things like that. And in the middle of it, you're like, man, I'm doing it. Right. I'm actually getting to do the thing I trained for years. But I can see how if you're in the field constantly, you're doing workups, you're doing trainings for enlistment after enlistment, you never get that chance to deploy. And then you get out.
Yep.
And you're like, I never got a real chance to go out there and do what I was training for.
No, and we can be kind of jerks too, because there's a lot of guys that'll be like, they'll make sure they tell you that they're a combat veteran, not just a veteran. So it's really just a dig for people. And, it's not like, I don't really think we should hold that against people, just because you were stationed in Kirkland, Washington, and you just didn't deploy, it doesn't mean you somehow didn't succeed at your job in the service. So I'm with you. No, it sucks. People come in, they want to go do whatever it is, and if you don't get to do it, it can be definitely disappointing for sure.
So did you, up until you retired in 2015? So did you just have back-to-back deployments up until you retired, or did you take a training command or anything else?
Right, so I did BUDS and then another command called Special Reconnaissance Team 1. It was like a new command. It was meant to provide intelligence support to the SEAL teams. Started that up, then I worked in the training for that, and then I deployed again before I left. But my last deployment, we were in Afghanistan. We rolled over a big roadside bomb. I got rocked. I was fine. I finished deployment. Just got I got knocked out. Got a little bit of frag.
What were you guys riding on?
An RG, a big MRAP. It threw us across the road. It was like one of those big, those laundry tubs? That's what they love to use in Afghanistan. Like the hard plastic one. It was full of HME, whatever it was.
And just slightly buried?
Yeah. We just rolled over it and boom, just threw us across the road.
So did it knock you out?
It did, just for a little bit, maybe a couple minutes. But
do you remember when the explosion happened, or was it just out right away?
No, I remember thinking it was going to happen, because when you drive on those roads, you can see where it's happened before, and they're lazy. They just put it in the same hole and bury it over again, so you can see where it's happened before, and we're like, So I was anticipating it. We got rocked a little bit. We're fine. Went back to the base, and then I went and got scanned, and I had some pretty good black spots on the front of lobes, so definitely some traumatic brain injury. and finished out the deployment. But then when I got back, I spent a bunch of time at NICO. NICO's the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. It's like the TBI.
Okay, I went to
Test
the Intrepid Center here on Pendleton on the west
Right.
side.
So that one was built after this one. So I went through that program and then kind of got processed out after that.
And that was due to that final IED blast.
Right. So they were going to medically retire me, but I wanted to push through for no good reason. And so I stayed for a little bit longer and then retired.
Wow. So before we get into that, you have that IED blast. Did you have any other big incidents or getting hit or?
I did. I had a grenade go off in the room I was in. It perforated both my eardrums.
What
on a
happened?
different deployment.
Tell me about that.
I think that was in Baghdad. I don't even remember, honestly. We were in a house and I think one of the guys had a grenade on him, one of the insurgents that we were after, and just detonated, blew both my eardrums out, rocked me for a while.
So you guys were clearing a building?
I believe so, yeah.
So walk me through that. So you guys were.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. We got brain injuries. We don't remember.
No. But yeah, I think it was just a house we went against. I think we went upstairs maybe, and I think upstairs someone threw it. It bounced off the wall. I didn't even see it. I just heard it go off. And it hurt. It hurt more than other things that have had happen, like both my eardrums. I remember being really dizzy, a lot of nausea. I think I almost threw up.
So were you out of it at that point?
Yeah,
and the rest of the team moved in?
I just went back to the truck. Yeah, went and sat in the truck. But I think that's the only other like serious one that I had.
Did you catch any frag at that time or just perforated?
Probably, but nothing that stuck. You know,
Yeah.
like when I was at NICO, I had a big one in my forehead and it kept coming out and out and out. And he finally cut it out.
Oh man,
pretty funny. I have this picture with my daughter, and we're at Bud's on the grinder. And I don't know if you've probably seen the statue of the creature of the Black Lagoon. So she's swinging from the arm of that, like holding it, and I'm standing there in uniform, and you can see this big knot in my forehead, and it's from the frag like working itself, because it just works itself out eventually, you know. But it's pretty funny.
Oh man. So were you just at dinner one day and then just a piece of frag falls out on your table?
No, that one took so long they had cut it out. But I'd had some other, you just pick them out, they come out of your face.
Wow. So now you've had those blasts, and you have this last ID blast. And did they take you out of that deployment after they checked you, or did you finish the rest of that up and then you went home?
No, I was the senior enlisted. I finished the deployment and then we went home.
Oh.
Yeah.
So at this point, were you senior chief at this time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you come home at this point, you're on the back end of the career. Did you start having symptoms?
I did, yeah. And I had a lot of PTSD, so I was having sleep issues, the whole gambit, the PTSD, depression, anxiety, a lot of headaches. I still have tinnitus now, ringing in my ears all the time. But it wasn't until then I started taking it seriously. And, going to NICO really helped me, kind of get set up and figure out what I needed to do. And then, honestly, I started also volunteering at the surf clinic. Balboa Hospital has a surf clinic. They did. And so I would volunteer there while I was on active duty. That's where I reconnected with Alex, my buddy that started One More Wave, and a couple other guys. And that's really how we started that whole program.
Wow. So did you, if you don't mind me asking, because I know there's a lot of people out there that probably suffer from it.
Sure.
The PTS, what were some of the things that were bothering you? Was it nightmares or just being out in public or?
Nightmares, and I had lots of nightmares, lots of sleep disturbances. I didn't have anything during the day, just a lot of anxiety, but the crowd thing wasn't really a big thing for me, but I know that affects a lot of people. And for me, it just didn't ever stop. And so I would get no sleep. So then I would drink to help me sleep and then get up and do caffeine or nicotine and then just get in this cycle of not only not good sleep, but really bad sleep, and then all the emotional drama that's going on in your brain too. So it took me a little bit to kind of shake that loose. It still comes back on, but mine was definitely nightmares for sure.
And so did you obviously you knew what was going on, but did it really start to kind of take effect of you and the family life once you took a step back from the deployments and now you're about to retire?
Yeah, once I stopped, and I was like taking a breath, and you're like, oh, I'm a mess. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. If I'd kept going, I probably could have put it off further, but thankfully I stopped and then was able to start, taking care of myself.
So was there a big moment of where like, man, I need to get help, or was it NICO?
No, NICO for sure helped me. Yeah.
So you go there. What do they do while you're at NICO? Just kind of therapy, talk therapy, things like that?
It's what it is so it was a test bed really they wanted to get brain scans of everyone that they knew had multiple traumatic brain injuries, blast injuries. And so the first thing to do is like get you in their MRI that's turned up higher than anywhere else in the US. And they scan your whole body, and then they just start going through, hey, what's going on here? And they just kind of avail you of what kind of therapies there are. So it could be, talk therapy, music therapy, art therapy, equine therapy, all those, every kind of thing that you can think of, you do that. And while you're there, and then you're with another group, or you're with a group like a cohort yourself. I'm sure it was the same when you did it. So
yeah, it was funny when I went through. I was mid-20s, and then I'm in there with a bunch of senior chief SEALs and a PJ and like a Army SF guy. They're all on their third divorce and they're about to retire.
Exactly.
And then there's me. I'm like 24, 25. I'm like,
yeah, that's how it was for me. It was all old soft guys. That was it. So yeah, when you finish that at the end, I think how it worked for me was they would like fly your spouse out because you could stay at the Fisher House there.
yep, I stayed there. Yep.
And your spouse comes out, and they're supposed to like, I shouldn't say supposed to. What they do is like your team of doctors like sits down with the spouse and like tells you, hey, this is what's going on with Corey, so you can kind of know when you get back. And that was really it. And so when I came back, I got in some more. We had like support groups back at the teams, and so I started meeting. We had like these groups. We kind of chat, and all the people that had been to NICO would continue to have treatment when we got back. So that was pretty cool. I was glad that they were doing that. I'm glad that they were doing that. But that was really where I started. Like, hey, I need to like take a step back and start figuring out what will work for me to kind of get me on the right path.
And so was that, while you were at NICO, was surfing and kind of being in the water something that started sticking out to you that helped, or was it journaling or talk therapy, or what was it?
The talk therapy was not good for me, like one-on-one, but like the group stuff was good. So like when I'm with a group of other people and we're talking about experiences, that was more impactful to me than the one-on-one stuff with the therapist for whatever reason. But it wasn't until I got back and started like volunteering. Like volunteering was a big thing for me to like get healing. So I'm like taking care of somebody else. I don't have to focus on me. And then now I'm getting to do what I love, which is go surfing and be in the ocean. So that was definitely a pivotal moment for me for sure. Was like, oh, I can do this and help other people and feel good and, convince other people that you don't have to, stay at home and try to fix yourself in the garage when you have emotional trauma. You can go be with other people. And so me being able to tell other people about that and like share my path and what's worked for me has been, definitely healing for me.
Nice. Did you, was there any struggle getting into sobriety, or was that just kind of it naturally went away?
No, I mean, I'd been drinking every day for a long time, so I didn't need to go to like rehab or anything, but it's a lifestyle change for sure. Like growing up in the teams, like all you do is go to work and then you come back and then maybe you go out and everyone's drinking. It's just part of the thing.
Yeah.
I think it's not just the teams.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the whole military, but but like to change that was harder than stopping drinking. Like the part of like, hey, we're going to this person's house and then you're sitting there and everyone else is drinking. Everyone looks at you like a weirdo, or what's going on. So that was I thought harder than stopping drinking was the engagement with my friends that I used to go party with or drink or, hang out with. You don't do that anymore. We still hang out, but like now we're hanging out sober. So it's just different for sure.
So are you drinks every now and then or totally sober?
No, I haven't had anything to drink in years.
So did you lose a lot of friends from not drinking?
I wouldn't say lose them, but don't hang out as much for sure. Yeah.
So apart from dealing with the TBI issues and things like that, I mean, you were in for 23 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, you were at the tip of the military for the United States military. How was that? I mean, you've been pretty much since you were a teenager, a SEAL. Now that's coming to an end. You're dealing with brain injury, PTS issues, drinking, all of this, and then you have the family now. How was that transition of trying to figure out who Rob is now?
It was super challenging. I mean, you go from doing this one thing and now you're just not anymore. So I cheated. I just started doing government contracting. So I retired. And while I was on terminal leave, which is like leftover vacation, I was already doing the same thing I was doing before.
Like, I got to get back to personal security detail. This is
oh no, none of that. I never want to do that. But training other people to do soft like stuff, I did that for like 2 years when I retired.
Did you do that here in the States or did you go out?
Both. And so like that, like right after I started doing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate this. Cause it's not the same. It's not the same as when you're on a team with your friends and, fellow service members. When you're a contractor, you're just alone and unafraid, and I hated it. It's paid great, but I couldn't wait to be done. And so I kept looking for other things, but I'd just keep hopping on different a contract will last for a year and then stop, or 3 months and then stop. And luckily, after we had like got One More Wave really going, Starbucks came and did a documentary on us. And so that happened, and we got like a lot of attention. People wanted to come help. People wanted to donate. Lots of people wanted to apply for gear. And, you know, the other two guys, Kyle and Alex, they were still in, and I had been out for a little bit.
And so they started One More Wave.
So Alex started it. Yep. Alex and I were at Team 3 in the 90s together. And then I met him. I'd seen him again many times over the years. And then, you know, he came back to the West Coast, and we were both volunteering at the same surf clinic that the hospital used to run. And he started One More Wave. And so I came in a little bit later trying to do all the veteran relation stuff and doing all the, you know, like applications and all that whole process. And so we just all couldn't do it after work anymore. It was getting too much. And so the other two guys were like, hey, let's just hire Rob instead. So that's how I started in 17.
Because they were still active duty.
They were still in, both of them in. And so I came in, and then luckily I've been able to keep doing it since then. And it's just been awesome.
Wow. So have you figured out who Rob is?
Yeah. Dirtbag surfer.
I can attest. When I first met Rob, I was like, this guy, he's the chillest man I've ever met.
I'm living my best life.
So One More Wave really helped you figure out, and then giving back and volunteering and helping other people, which you've given your life to service. So that kind of, you found that in a different way.
For sure. I get to keep giving back, and I get to keep serving, and I get to help other people maybe kind of navigate for a little bit. It's funny. At first, I used to get really, I wouldn't say upset, but I'd be really disappointed when people would come in really hard. They just learn to surf. They want gear. They'd be around for about a year and then leave and go on and be like, man, what happened? Am I doing something wrong? And it really wasn't that at all. It was just people would like figured out that it was okay to ask for help. And surfing might have been the first thing they did. Now they moved on to horseback riding or shooting or podcasting, whatever it is. And all we did was kind of help them get on the path. So I'm super grateful I get to do that. I don't care if people only do it for 3 or 4 months. Maybe it keeps them from checking out those 3 months. And they're like, oh, it's worth doing whatever, and move on to something else. So I'm so grateful that I get to do that and maybe help somebody just make it over that hump, you know, that I know I needed. Because a lot of us are idiots. We think we can fix ourselves at home and, you know, in the garage. But you need some friends to kind of slap you around and go, hey, dumbass, let's go. Let's get doing this, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be surfing. It can be anything. But getting out of the house and out of our own funk is what we need for sure.
I agree with you. And how long have you been doing One More Wave now?
Since 2017.
2017.
Yeah.
So do you have any big stories of people that have come into the program that have really moved you?
Yeah, I mean, many. One of my favorite things is when someone's spouse comes up to me and they're like, hey, you know, you gave Corey that board, you know, 6 months ago. He was a total asshole before, and now he's nice. He gets up, he's excited to do something. He sleeps better. It's so rewarding. Getting to do the adaptive surfing competitions with all the vets that have like whatever injury, missing parts is incredibly, I get to give back, right? So I'm helping people find this joy in the ocean. They're getting to compete. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it. I love going to like the rehab centers and talking to vets that are in some type of distress, whether it's, you know, substance abuse or mental health, and kind of showing them that there's another way. Maybe they want to come try surfing, and then getting them on the path to doing something different. I love that. The more I can help the people that kind of go unseen when it comes to war injuries, the better. And by that, I mean like people with not physical scars, right? So luckily, probably 15 to 20% of the people that One More Wave supports are, I shouldn't say luckily most of them aren't severely physically injured, right? Most people have PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, but people don't want to talk about that. It's not that cool. It's not as cool as seeing Jose, a great friend of mine, triple amputee, charging into 15-foot waves. You know, they'd much rather see that than somebody that's suffering with addiction of some sort. So I love the ability to be able to reach out to those folks and, you know, just chat and show them, hey, we can do other things. Here's some other stuff to do. That's the most impactful to me for sure.
Do you feel like there's anything that kind of keeps people from asking for help, or keeps people from getting plugged into a community like One More Wave?
I think so. I think, you know, it starts out when you're in the military, right? You don't want to say you're hurt because you don't want to miss something, right? You definitely, if you twist your ankle before you're in deployment, you probably will hide it because you don't want to have to stay home. And that kind of transitions into, I'm hurting. I don't want to tell anybody that, you know, I'm having nightmares, or I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm drinking way too much. I think it transitions into that. You want to stay in the game. You want to stay with your friends. And so you just kind of learn to do it yourself. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of shame. You don't want to have to ask for help. I remember when I came back from NICO and I'd been diagnosed with PTSD, I went to the security manager and I'm like, hey, I got diagnosed with PTSD. And I'm thinking they're going to like take over my security clearance. It's like, yeah, welcome to the club. So is everybody else. And I was like, wow, I've never heard that before. You know? So I think just hearing those things make people understand that it's okay to kind of seek some help, what other path it's going to be.
Yeah, because I'm guessing for the majority of your career, even if you got hurt or things happen, and maybe most guys, you want to keep doing your job. And so you're like, I'm good. I'm fine.
Right. And
Right.
even more so, if you want to advance, if you want to go up in the ranks, you have to do certain jobs. And if you sit out, you miss your spot. So then you get put in the back of there's a whole kind of stacking order that you want to be in if you want to keep moving up, you know, getting that next job, making more money, doing whatever it is. And so all that piled together, I think, kind of stacks against you to say that you need help.
Yeah, when we met, I met you through One More Wave, and I was in not the best place at the time and still struggling with the TBI, but I remember getting out surfing. I dabbled in it, but whenever we went out, and it got me back into it, and just something about being out in the water. I mean, even if you don't catch that many waves, or if you're just out there, when you get back in your truck, it's just, you just feel relaxed.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that? Getting out there surfing, I mean, just being out there.
Absolutely. Still today, it
Yeah.
does the same thing to me. I think it just kind of lets you check out a little bit, right? You have to focus, you have to be present. What I always say is the ocean doesn't care if you're having a bad day. So if you don't pay attention, you know, the ocean's going to let you know. So I think it really forces us to focus and be present and, you know, really think about it's okay to just experience some joy. I think it's hard for adults to admit that, you know, you used to like to do something, whatever it is, you know, fishing or riding or surfing. So I think when you get out there and do whatever that thing is, you get that relief that you just experienced, you know, from just not having to worry about other things and just focusing on yourself for a second.
I gotcha. So did you end up remarrying?
I did. Yep.
So how'd that happen? Tell me about
Fantastic. No, online dating. And we dated for a couple of years. We got married. It's fantastic.
how you met her. Nice.
And honestly, it's been a little bit easier. She was Navy too. She's a Navy pilot. She got medically retired a couple of years ago. So we've been on this path together. She's awesome. We have 4 kids.
Wow.
So it's a whole crew.
And so you had 4 kids with her, or
No,
3 kids?
I have 2 from my previous marriage, and she had 2 from her previous marriage.
So were you already on the path of your recovery, of dealing with everything, getting reining it in when you met her?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I was trying for sure.
She was pretty supportive during that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's easier when you have a military spouse that kind of understands the lifestyle?
I think it was easier for me. Yeah. And for me, I was more mature. You know, I kind of knew what I wanted. I was just, you know, I think it's just better. I was better at it, you know. And to be honest, I tried way harder. I don't think I tried as hard as I should have the first time around, you know.
Yeah.
So just, you know,
So what's the secret to a good marriage?
I don't know, talking, you know, chatting with each other. You know?
I know I in therapy, all the therapy I've done, and then kind of some couples therapy and stuff in the past, that's what it always comes back to. The therapist, I would tell her something, and she's like, well, that sounds like something you should communicate with your partner. And that's like almost the answer to everything. It's like, well, did you tell her that?
Nope.
No.
Sure didn't.
Well, maybe you should just talk to her.
No, I think talking and understanding and honesty for sure.
Yeah. Did you feel, because whenever I got out, and I noticed it on the back end, and then when I got out and a couple years afterwards, but I was so good at compartmentalizing things and just boxing up my emotions, and I was just switched off. Like I had past relationships where they'd be crying and I was just nothing there, just totally boxed off. And I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to talk about my feelings or tell them what I was thinking. Did you struggle with that?
I think it was easier starting with a fresh person, but yes, at first I still do. You know, it's still kind of hard to do that, but like you said, just chatting. If something bothers you, just immediately bringing it up instead of waiting until it's 50 things, I think is the key for me, for sure.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up, we took a question from one of our guests that reached out for this episode. And so this is going to be a question from James. And he asked, do you have any regrets or things that you would have changed from any past deployments or your time in the military? And if so, what is it?
I don't think so. I think the only thing I wish I had done more of early on, when my kids were little, was be a little bit more involved in like school stuff, because it wasn't until much later, and then I felt like I had to play catch up. But no, I don't think so. I had a great run. I could have been better at being a husband, I think. So I definitely regret that. I feel bad often thinking about, that I didn't even really try. But no, I loved my gig. I had a great time. I made incredible friends. I feel like I had some purpose. So I don't have a lot of regrets from the job. Just I wish I'd been better about family time, I think, early on.
And do you feel like as you've gotten older that becomes more important?
For sure, of course.
Yeah.
You realize what's important.
Yeah. I before we wrapped up with this, I just wanted to ask you, do you, with everything you've done, all the experiences you have, do you ever just sit back and think of the life you're at now, but think about, wow, I can't believe like I did those things? Does that ever come back to you? Do you just replay these memories in your mind and it just seems like it feels like another lifetime ago for you?
It does. It feels like it was when I was a kid, and now I'm
Right.
an adult, for sure.
Even the little things that I've done, I'll sit at home and just think back, and I'm like sitting with my 2 cats and my girlfriend, and I'm like, can't believe I did that. So I can't imagine for you.
No, I think back all the time and go, oh man, that was that. What's funny is, you forget some things, and you'll meet with a friend you haven't seen in a while, and you go, hey, remember that one time that thing happened? You go, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're still alive. But yeah, for sure.
Well, as we're wrapping up, do you have, with One More Wave, what do you guys got going on right now?
It's a charity. We're based here in San Diego. What we do is provide injured and disabled veterans with custom surfing solutions. And what that means is, what we're trying to do is provide people that want to surf that are veterans with equipment that will get them riding waves. And so that could mean some type of a foam top entry-level board for someone new to surfing, or something totally adaptive for somebody that has some physical injuries that need help, maybe an amputation, a spinal injury, brain injury, something like that. So we try to get the equipment in the person's hands and then offer a community to surf with. And so we have chapters all over the U.S. We have one in San Diego, Oahu, Puerto Rico, Guam, Okinawa, and now we have 2 in Florida, Virginia Beach, and North Carolina.
Wow.
So all those groups meet the 3rd Saturday of every month from 8 to 12, right around that time. And it's really simple. We just show up and surf. We try to keep it very simple, very unstructured, so that people don't want to skip a certain part because there's something they don't like, whether it's mindfulness, yoga, faith-based, whatever it might be. We got rid of all that. So now it's just you come and surf, talk some trash, have some coffee, and get in the water. And that's been really beneficial to us. So we're just going to keep doing that. We just try to keep expanding. We keep fundraising to keep making more boards, to keep more vets surfing.
Wow. So the headquarters is here in San Diego?
Yep.
So in these chapters, is it people that have just been through the program and stuck around and they're running the chapter, say in Florida or on the East Coast or Hawaii?
That's right. Exactly. Some of them have never gotten anything. They're just a vet from the area. There's a guy in New Smyrna Beach. His name's Dan. He just was interested in starting it up. He's a surfer, and he started it up. He's never gotten anything for One More Wave. And now they've got a great chapter going.
Nice.
But the other groups have all been people that were One More Wave. They've gotten gear and then decided they want to start a chapter in their local spot. So
Nice.
that's how it's worked out.
So if they're here in San Diego or Hawaii or Florida or elsewhere, how do they, if they're out there struggling or they just want to try something new and they're a vet, how do they get plugged in with One More Wave? How do they reach out?
Sure. So the easiest way is just to go on the website, onemorewave.com. Excuse me. They can apply for gear and come reach out. When they apply, when anyone applies, they're going to talk to me. It's just my wife and I. So everyone that applies, I'm going to catch their stuff. We're going to talk, and we're going to see what we can do. You can hit us on Instagram, Facebook, whatever is your flavor, and we'll do our best to kind of reach out and get you. But yeah, anybody can reach out. It's super family friendly. You can bring kids, whoever you want, to all the events, but you just got to come and you just got to make that first call. A couple of the cool things we're doing now is we're actually starting the surf clinic up again at Balboa Hospital. So each week we're taking out some patients, and we're also offering, we have a guy from the VA that comes to our meetups, and he'll answer questions and help people out with claims. We're actually allowing people to do their claims off-site at the One More Wave shop here in San Diego. So if you don't want to go to the VA, you can do your claim right in our shop watching a surf video.
Wow. And where's the shop? What city in San Diego?
It's in Tierra Santa, so it's just a small little suburb of Mission Valley. But what I didn't realize is how many people still feel that they feel unwelcome at the VA. And so it's great that we can, come off-site. If you don't want to go, it was really cool. A couple months ago, a lady came and her dad was a Vietnam vet, and he's African American, and he had never been because the racism was so bad when he came back. Well, he came
At the VA?
Yeah, he never did his claim ever, and so he just recently finished it using our guy, and he was able to get his claim, get back paid for 1,000 years, and it was fantastic. So we're looking forward to helping more people out that maybe don't feel comfortable going in. They can come do it with us and never see the VA ever. So
that's cool. Amazing. And so they don't have to be post 9/11.
Nope, no. So we're open to everybody. So one of the big things that we noticed early on is there's a lot of groups that are only post 9/11. So we're open to everybody. We've made boards for Vietnam vets and people injured in Syria. It also doesn't matter how you exited the service. So if you have a bad conduct, like you got thrown out, you're usually not availed of anything, but we're open to everybody. So I always feel like if someone got thrown out, they probably need more help than anybody else. And so we're open to everybody. It doesn't matter how you left the service. Just if you're a vet and you've got a disability rating, we will help you out.
That's amazing. And there are there's a lot of amazing organizations out there, but there's definitely that checkoff list.
Yeah.
That you
And I understand, but
yeah. And so how did One More Wave, was it from the start? It's like, hey, this isn't going to be just a SOF community, a SEAL community, combat vet community. Was it from the beginning, this is going to be open for anybody who served?
No, absolutely. And the reason it started was because no one was making adaptive surfboards at that time. So a friend of ours was struggling. He's an Air Force guy, below the knee amputee, and he was just having a tough time surfing after his injury. So we made him the board, kind of got hooked on it. Alex started, he's a great artist. He does all our shirts. So we started selling shirts out of his truck, and that's when Starbucks found out about us. We made a couple more, and we were only doing adaptive surfboards at first, then we kind of opened up to everybody. But it was really just to support the surf clinic. There's a bunch of people coming through that needed equipment, and that's how we started.
Just right place, right time.
Yeah, and we never were just SOF. I think we've done 740 some boards right now, and I think like 12 have gone to SEALs.
So how's your main source of fundraising? How can people help out?
Sure, they can donate on the website. We get lots of donations from companies, and then we do go after grants, and of course we do fundraising events too. And then of course we sell merch on the store.
I've seen some of the latest merch. I need to buy some about them jumping out of the helicopter with the surfboards. I'm like, that's a sick shirt.
Those are the most popular ones right now. Yeah.
So whenever people get started, do they need any kind of experience surfing or anything like that?
For us to give them gear, they need to have surfed before at some point. If they haven't, then what happens is I'll connect them with a group that teaches surfing to vets for free. There's some on both coasts in Hawaii. So if people have never surfed and they just want to try, they can reach out to me. I will connect them with somebody who will teach them to free. And then once they've got a couple lessons and decided they like it, then we'll give them the gear. It's no problem.
Nice. And you guys sponsor, or you work with adaptive athletes surfing? We
do. So Team USA has parasurfing. So all the vets that are on Team USA have One More Wave gear.
Wow. Yeah. How'd you get plugged in with Team USA?
Because if you are a vet, you can get a stipend from the VA if you're competing. And so all those guys, we started just meeting them at the different competitions and started kind of gathering them in to make sure they knew we were around. And then we started supporting folks competing, actually. So like Jose is a triple amputee. He needs to be pushed into a wave and caught. And so we started teaming up. That's a 3-person team just for Jose to surf.
Wow.
So all those folks need different versions of help. We're making a board for 2 boards for a guy named Forrest right now. He's a below the knee amputee. He's really good. He's also on Team USA as a parasurfer. So any of those folks, actually all of them that are on Team USA have our equipment.
And are they surfing with the prosthetics on?
Yep.
Really?
Well, everyone's different. Most of them do.
Wow.
Some people have a surf foot.
Yeah. Wow. Well, with One More Wave, are there any big events or anything coming up here in San Diego? Because I know a lot of listeners are local around here. If they want to try surfing or just come out and meet you guys, or especially here in San Diego, do you guys have any times or places, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So here in San Diego, we meet every 3rd Saturday of the month at Del Mar Beach. And you just show up. You just come up. You'll see the tent. There's a place called Powerhouse Park. It's just a big grass field there. Just look for the tent and come over and say hi, and we'll get you hooked up. You can also go to the website, onemorewave.com, and look up events, and it has all our locations. There's a little pin on there so you can, navigate to the spot. Each spot's a little bit different, but you can find all that info on the website under events. It'll have all the locations and when we're surfing.
Nice. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you've done for the country.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.